Welcome to the audio conferencing center. Please enter a conference ID followed by pound. After the tone, please record your name and then press pound. You're now joining the meeting.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the... We're very, very glad that all of you are here with us today, and we will go ahead and call this meeting to order. And I also want to find out who is online with us. Do we have Dr. Mosley?
Yes, Fred.
And is Kenneth online as well? All right, I think Kenneth may be joining us, or he may be showing up, one or the other. But thank you, board members, for being here this morning. Ms. Cowart, if you would be so kind as to lead us in a moment of inspiration. Thank you.
Moment of inspiration. Have a moment of inspiration this morning, as I was just asked to come before you and pray, but there's so many things facing our country today, and whenever these things happen, I just always look to the Lord for wisdom and guidance and to be led by the Spirit. I want to thank all of you in this room for your dedication to education and, most importantly, to our children, because that is who we're here for. So if you'll bow with me this morning, we'll pray before we'll start. Father, we just thank you and praise you for all the gifts in life that you've given us, for the opportunity to serve. We praise you for the glory of who you are. We thank you for the power that you have to help us overcome obstacles that seem to be in our way. We thank you for all that you provide and all that you supply. Father, I ask that you will bless everyone here, every family represented. And most importantly, Father, help us remember why we're here. Give us wisdom, give us discernment in every area of our life. But most importantly, as we seek to do your will, not our own. I thank you and praise you for Chairman Sweeney, who endeavors to lead us and guide us the very best that he can. Be with him today. Be with everyone here and all those listening. We thank you and praise you in the holy, mighty name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
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 Leanne, you want to continue with the pledge? Okay, so we have some special guests here today. We have Brian Siemens from Lanier County Schools. Brian, thank you for being here today. Also with us, we have several representatives from Cobb County Schools. John Floresta, Principal Dr. Catherine Milanda from Walton High School, Dr. Tina Link, also from Walton High School, and Sally Winokur, and she works a big supporter of the Walton High School community. I've known each and every one of them for many years myself. And then we also have Craig Harper with Paige. Craig, thank you for being here very much. In addition, we have Laura Dickerson and Jennifer Gordon from Haralson County and the GMAP Consortium. All right, well, thank you very much. So at this point in time, we are going to open up our public hearing, and this is a public hearing in regards to State Board Rule Georgia Board of Education Rule 160-4-2-.13, which is the statewide passing score. And so we have several speakers today. And the first speaker on our list is Brian Siemens with Lanier County Schools. So Brian, if you take the podium, please.
Good morning.
And I'm sorry, is it sermons?
Sermons, that's correct.
All right, thank you. Sorry
It's
for that.
all right. Mr. Superintendent, members of the board, it's an honor to stand before you today to address the issue of the Georgia end-of-course assessment content weights. My name is Brian Sermons, and I'm a 16-year educator teaching U.S. history at Lanier County High School in Lakeland, Georgia. I also have the privilege of serving the great people of Georgia, having been appointed by Governor Kemp as the chairman of the Georgia Professional Standards Commission. I teach in a part of Georgia that is oftentimes forgotten and overlooked. Rural Georgia, along with the rest of our state, has suffered greatly during the causes of COVID-19, due to causes of COVID-19, and to make sure that our school had an adequate plan to safely reopen at the beginning of this school year, we delayed our reopening by 3 weeks because our first priority was the safety and the well-being of our students, our faculty, and our community. Now, our first semester ends on January the 15th. However, our students are scheduled to take the end-of-course test on December the 7th, 4 full weeks before the actual end of the course. With students and teachers being placed on quarantine sometimes multiple times, a great deal of instruction is also lost. We've had cases where students have missed 4+ weeks, over 22% of their instruction this semester alone. Out of an abundance of caution, we have encouraged faculty and students that if they feel sick to please stay at home and monitor your health. And this has caused a great issue with student and faculty attendance. Once back from quarantine, students and teachers struggle to catch up, even though students have tried trying to patch holes in a wall. Students have expressed that they are never feeling truly caught up. I'm most concerned with students being tested in Algebra 1. Freshmen missed the entire 4th 9 weeks of their 8th grade year, and if you couple that loss of instruction with a quarantine the first semester of their freshman year, then this loss of instruction is compounded. The stress level of teachers is like nothing that we've ever seen. As an educator, I'm not opposed to end-of-course testing, and I look forward to helping my students get ready. However, due to so many elements that are outside of our control, I've had to focus on the most important issue in my classroom, and that's the physical and mental health and well-being of my students. At the beginning of the school year, my principal, Ms. Rita Ham, spoke to us about the new challenges that as educators we were going to face. She said we needed to focus on relationships before rigor, love before lessons, patience before programs, and grace before grades. Today, all of us in this room are fighting for the same cause, and we're all on the same team for a fair and appropriate education for all of Georgia's children. And I ask this morning that you please stand up and please take the opportunity to put faith and trust back in the hands of Georgia's educators and vote for the recommendation of the state school superintendent to move our weights back to 0.01%. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, next up we have John Floresta with Cobb County Schools. John heads up the communications department with the Cobb County Schools.
Good morning, Superintendent Woods, Board of Education. It's a pleasure to see each and every one of you, and I bring greetings from Superintendent Ragsdale. We have our own board meeting today, or else he would be here, but he wanted to say thank you. Knowing that each and every one of us in this room are dealing with the most complex time in public education, first of all, thank you. All of these issues are weighty. The issue before you today is weighty. It is certainly not simple, and during a traditional year, issues of accountability and flexibility and the balance between the two are complicated. And this is anything but obviously a normal school year, as we all know. We do thank you for your commitment to that, and we know that this board has been committed to flexibility and accountability and has balanced those things well over the years. Knowing that that balance is always difficult, during a normal school year, when students are able to take the end-of-course test in a valid and reliable way, I'm going to repeat that phrase a couple times, end-of-course tests are important, and they can be a very important measure of how our students are doing, how our schools are doing, and what our students and schools need. They also can provide an important incentive for students, for college admissions and scholarships and some of the things that you've been discussing over the course of the last 30 days. But this is not a normal school year, and at least in Cobb, all of our students are not able to take the end of course test this year. 48% of our students are currently learning from home, 52% are currently learning from our buildings, and those 48% will not be able to be assessed, we believe anyway, in a valid and reliable way. We want accountability, we want valid and reliable accountability. And in a pandemic year, we aren't sure that that can be accomplished. For this year, without all students participating, we believe that assigning a significant grade incentive will make it difficult at best to make those determinations. It'll make it difficult to know how our schools are doing accurately and could damage students' college applications, student GPAs, scholarship totals, and the like. We do support, during this pandemic year, lowering of a incentive for the end of course test down to 0.01. And during this pandemic year, we hope that the impact of these exams on student grades and the potential harm to their grades for those 52,000 students in Cobb is minimized to the greatest extent possible. You know, it is the intent of this board to benefit and work for the students of Georgia. We believe that, we support that, and we know whichever way this vote goes today, we'll continue to partner with you in that. We do believe, and as I transition to a principal, a teacher, and a parent, we believe that the student voice is the most important voice in this conversation, and we hope that you consider that heavily. We know that you have, and we hope that you consider that heavily inside of your vote today. With that, I'm going to transition to Dr. Miranda, really the main course for us this morning. You can hear a little bit more about the impact on students in Cobb.
Welcome.
Morning.
Good morning, Chairman Sweeney, Superintendent Woods, and the board members. Thank you so much for letting us come today. Dr. Catherine Melanda. I'm the principal at Walton High School. We're a conversion charter school within Cobb County, Georgia. And I see the purpose of these end-of-course tests to inform us, to inform the students, the parents, the teachers, the school, strengths and weaknesses, and ways to be improving. And I believe my students and my teachers have worked so hard this year, harder than ever before. But much of the time has been spent on having a new way to learn. Learning digitally and remotely is very different than learning face-to-face. And our students have spent a lot of time learning that new way to learn over learning content. I'd like to tell you about a student that I've been working with for the past 5 years. I got to know her when she was in middle school. She has learning challenges, and her parents came to me because they were on a roller coaster of grades, up and down, up and down. And I started to mentor her, and she worked very hard to develop a toolkit of instructional strategies and study skills. And she realized that unlike some of her peers, she has to put in 100% every day to everything. Well, she's committed to that. And by the time she was a 9th grader, instead of that roller coaster, she had all A's at our school. We were so proud of her. Well, come last March, all of a sudden we had a lot of tears because it was hard and that toolkit didn't work the way it was supposed to. Well, she's back in school and she's happy and she's doing well, but she's already said to me, gosh, I know I have that test in the spring and I don't think I learned everything I was supposed to learn. During remote, we've had to prioritize standards, make adjustments for our students while they learned that new way to learn, and remediate last spring, especially in areas like math. We've lost significant instructional time with a tropical storm in the middle of the year, who knew? This is no fault of the students. These are circumstances that they've been given. So I say consider a junior who next year at this time might be the day before an early action decision at UGA, and they are sitting and they've applied, and whether or not test scores are part of that decision, we all know that transcript is part of that decision making for college, for scholarships, all of those things. I would hate for one test to influence that ability for our Georgia students to get into college. College is more competitive, it's globally competitive, and let's be honest, our flagship universities are very difficult to get into. I also think we need to consider the students who have stayed home remotely for legitimate reasons. I would hate a student to have to make a decision between their health, the health of their parent, the health of their grandparent, and coming to take this test because it goes on their transcript. Certainly we want the feedback and we want the accountability when times are able, but I hope that you will consider how this could negatively impact these students right now and give them a year to have that count only the 0.01%. Thank you so much.
Dr. Link?
I'm nervous, so I'm going to read. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to advocate for our students. My name is Tina Link, and I'm a teacher at Walton High School for biology and AP research. I would ask that you bear with me as I present a scenario in which I pretend to be a research student and you are the IRB. The purpose of my study is to gather diagnostics information to help students identify strengths as well as gaps in their learning, therefore improving performance in all high school courses. I propose to do this by administering course exams designed to cover the content taught during a typical school year, thereby providing data to evaluate the effectiveness of classroom instruction at the school, system, and state levels. The results of the test are to be a significant portion of the students' course grades. As such, I'd like to give you my limitations to my study. First, I'm aware that schools lost a significant amount of instruction last spring. This year, sequential classes such as math, foreign language, needed to take a step back and either remediate or cover material that could not be covered spring semester. Second, I also understand that the school year started several weeks later than normal. Third, I acknowledge that there is an inconsistency between face-to-face and remote instruction and thereby learning. Remote learning requires more organizational and time management skills. It requires a level of self-sufficiency and discipline that is not inherent in the traditional education process. This has additional implications for learning disabilities diagnosed and undiagnosed. Fourth, it is recognized that the same opportunities that exist for some students are not available to other students, be it technology, internet access, or oversight. Fifth, the researcher understands that decisions made regarding a student's learning platform is not only based on educational value, but safety, which according to Maslow must first be met before instruction even has a chance of success. A potentially lethal virus is a concern for the safety of the student and the student's family. Finally, due to the unique circumstances of the current school year, the data collected using an exam designed for a typical school year can be used to inform students of a gap in learning, but cannot be used with the intent to improve performance at all high school courses. The test will not be able to provide data to evaluate the effectiveness of classroom instruction at the school system, state levels with any reliability. The data collected from administering these tests could provide information on how the COVID virus has affected instruction. It can also inform schools and school systems where to improve should another pandemic or natural disaster occur. The potential harm, though, is that between grades, students must choose between grades and potential health risks. Students who use a remote platform would be required to come to a building face-to-face where social distance cannot be maintained in a testing environment. Students who are not able to come to the building will receive a score of 0, which will have a negative impact on their final grade. Based on the limitations, one would expect gaps in student learning, so an exam assessing a typical school year would negatively impact a student's grade. Going from a 90 to an 89 could be devastating. Final course grades have a substantial impact on overall GPAs, which can affect college admissions and scholarship opportunities. Our own state schools have a very competitive admissions process. In order to approve this research study, I understand that you as IRB must determine if the following Georgia Department of Education research criteria are met. Risks to subjects are reasonable in relation to any anticipated benefits to subjects and the importance of the knowledge to be gained. Risks to the subjects are minimized. And finally, additional safeguards are in place to protect the rights and welfare of participants from vulnerable populations. I respectfully submit that they are not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lynch. Next, we have Ms. Winokur.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak this morning. As Scott said, my name is Sally Winokur, and I'm a parent of a junior at Walton, and I also serve on the governance board for the charter at Walton. My son is a really fortunate young man. He's a great student. He's able to take all honors and AP courses. He works very hard to do those things. Next year, he hopes to be a qualified applicant for some of the selective universities. Over the last 8 months, I've watched him struggle in school more than I ever have. And his grades aren't terrible, but he has had to learn very differently. And even for a student who has an incredible GPA and has no issues with attending to anything, he is struggling. This is difficult for him. And I'm not sure that I foresaw how hard and how difficult taking 5 hours of classes online, followed by reading textbooks online, followed by taking and watching videos tutorial videos that teachers recommend, and then taking tests and quizzes online. Most of his peers have had a very stressful period with this time. And my son wanted to go back to school the minute he could go back to school. And he is there, and he loves being back in the building. He intends to also be back in the spring. At the beginning, I mentioned that my son is fortunate. I said that because he's fortunate that he can go back to school. We have no health issues in our house that would cause any concern should my husband or I get COVID. We are able to purchase the best internet and Wi-Fi. We are able to purchase, and we did, use textbooks, so he's not sitting in front of a screen as much as he was, and he's using the books. We can also hire the tutor if he needs it for any of his classes. With all these fortunate options I just mentioned, we are still worried about his grades, more than we have ever been in the past. I believe my son has learned a great deal over the last 8 months, both in and out of his classes. I believe his teachers have taught him truly valuable life lessons. However, I'm not sure these things he's learned can be measured on an EOC. And should he not do well on 1 or 2 of his tests, should his academic career be ruined because of that test? And to sum things up, I'd like to say I'm even more concerned about all the other students in Georgia who aren't as fortunate, and their parents can't purchase all those things I mentioned. I know that we're very lucky. And as a parent and a community member, I don't believe this is the year to hold our students or our teachers accountable. I believe we should applaud our students for doing the best they can in these times. And I think we need to be grateful for our educators for all they are doing to make education accessible and possible for our students. And I thank each one of you for what you do for our students.
Thank you very much. Mr. Craig Harper with Page.
Thank you, Chair Sweeney, Superintendent Woods, and the board. I appreciate you letting me speak for just a few minutes. You all received a letter from Page on behalf of all of our educators that are members of our association. I don't think I can add anything to the information you all have already reviewed or that you've heard from these excellent educators and parents and others who've already presented this information to you. I guess I think there was a comment yesterday about establishment associations and alphabet groups, and I guess I represent kind of both sides of that. And I don't think those of you that feel like it should stay at 10% or some higher percentage are heartless at all. I think you are acting on what you believe needs to happen in schools. We don't hold that against anybody, and think you're acting in good faith because you think that's going to be the best thing this year. But I think you've heard enough testimony and have enough information from those who are dealing with this on the ground, in classrooms, and on virtual platforms to know that this, if there ever is a time to make an adjustment on a temporary basis and not think about this from a compliance or test-based accountability standpoint, this would be the year to do that. Page has an initiative called the True Accountability for Georgia Schools that actually has a different model for accountability. It does not discount tests, we don't bash tests or their role in assessment of where students are, but we think there are better models, and I'd love to talk to you all later about that. Specifically on this issue, I think compassion and understanding where students are and the effort that educators are making to make sure students can do their best is the mindset we ought to have going into this. I would say if on a compliance-based model, if the idea is to hold students or educators' feet to the fire, that fire is out this year. There's a pile of cold ashes sitting there, and there's no fire to hold anybody's feet to because the accountability model doesn't really hold up in the situation we're in right now. And just one more analogy to maybe try to help make that point. I think about a high school athlete, maybe somebody that's track, and they're running and they get tripped inadvertently in the race. Not through no fault of their own or the competitor's fault, and they sprain their ankle. And right now we're asking that athlete to get back up and finish the race at a level close to where they were before they had an injury, instead of taking care of that athlete and making sure their health is taken care of and they can get back in the race at an appropriate time. And that's where we are. We need to pause what we're doing right now. We need to follow, I think, what the superintendent and the Department of Education have recommended, and what you've heard from so many people in your survey, and from those who have come and testified to you, and probably have sent you emails and contacted you outside this formal setting. But we do appreciate what you do and the way you're looking out for education and educators and the students and communities, and just hope that you would take into account these very unusual circumstances we're in right now, and consider going down to the 0.01 weight this year for end-of-course tests. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right. If there are no more speakers, I don't have any other speakers sign up, Ms. Caputo? No, sir. Okay, well, that will conclude our hearing. And what I'd like to do right now is take a brief 10-minute recess. Let's take a 10-minute recess, and then
Well, tell me about it. We on recess.
Butch, we're working through a couple things here. We'll be right with you.
Tell me about, did you say?
She says it'll take 2 or 3 days. And I need to use the cream, and I'm going to see her in Bainbridge in 2 weeks. And arthritis. I do have arthritis.
Going back to my meeting.
December the 2nd in the
Correct, Mr. Downey?
That is correct.
All right. Dr. Mosley, on the rules.
Yes.
On the Rules Committee, the only item that we have is the state board rule adoption, and this is on the statewide passing score. I'm going to step out on a limb and presume that you want to pull that for a separate vote.
Yes.
Okay, we'll pull that for a separate vote. On the State Schools Committee, Mr. Long, I don't believe you have any report.
No, sir, other than thank you for checking out all the.
That was great.
I think it's important that all of Georgia know about the resources that are available, and I think it's up to us to get out this resource to our individual areas. Hopefully, we can get some funding from legislature or something next year to get those around so we can get early testing for our kids, for our hearing. And I think it's, like I said, it's a very important asset that we've got, and I'm very thankful for that.
All right, and thank you for making those arrangements for the audiology lab tour yesterday. That was amazing. Thank you very much.
That's amazing.
All right, and then Ms. Kinnamore, with regard to the items that we need to pull regarding the state board meeting minutes, executive session minutes, called state board meeting minutes, et cetera.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to move the following to the consent agenda. The November personnel report, individual student waivers, minutes of the October 1st, 2020 State Board meeting, minutes of the October 1st, 2020 executive session meeting, minutes of the October 15th, 2020 call board meeting, the November legal report with the exception of 2 appeals being pulled for a separate vote.
Right. Any questions about moving those items over to the consent agenda? All right, fantastic. Then the superintendent will turn this over to you for your items. Superintendent's report.
I think we have about 3 presentations this morning. First of all, we have Dr. Dooley. Are you online? Dr. Dooley?
That's a negative.
Okay, we'll try to get her back. We'll kind of shift gears back in the back, Chris. So we'll go ahead and let Tiffany Taylor over policy. I think an issue looking, or the request has been mentioned on looking at charter. So Tiffany, we'll get you started.
I'm here.
We'll back that up, Chris. We'll let Dr. Dooley, and she has some presentations on some a request that I made as far as information, looking at student performance and I think areas of reading and math. So, Dr. Dooley, if you could, we'll turn the presentation over to you, and you can give background to everything.
Okay. Sorry, it's laying, so if I talk slowly, that's why. So I'm going to discuss our 5 academic outcomes. What we've had a chance to do is really look at the last 5 years and even before that when the data were available in order to understand how well Georgia has been doing. And we used multiple measures, as you would expect us to. You can go on to the next slide. Go on to the next, there you go. No, yeah. In general, takeaways that you can grab from this presentation is that Georgia is improving education outcomes across all academic areas, and that's according to multiple measures. Georgia's improvement has been accelerating, especially for students who are experiencing poverty. Georgia's grade 3 students enter at a lower academic level than they have in the past, but the rate of academic improvement accelerates each year through grade 12, surpassing their same age peers from prior cohorts. Outcomes for English learners and students with disabilities suggest a needed focus on these specific student needs. And Georgia's rate of change and improvement has somewhat slowed in comparison to the national rate. Or I should correct that to say not in comparison to, but in alignment to the national rate since 2013. Again, this is the rate of improvement because going back to that first point, the improvements have happened across all academic content areas. The first piece of evidence that I'll show you is the Lexile scores, and just to give you a little line of sight to where I'm headed with this, I'll show you the Lexile scores, the graduation rates, the milestone scores, the NAEP scores, or the National Assessment of Education Progress, and the external state rankings. So these are our cohort or our grade level Lexile scores across the years. You'll notice that there was a significant change that happened between 2014 and 15. This was a change in the milestones assessment. Some things about the Lexile itself. It is a norm reference it is for the readability of text, and then it's normed for each group. So they might say this is a 800 Lexile score, and it's typical of a 4th grader. Note that grade 3 Lexile scores have gone down, but grade 12 has gone up. That tells me that the longer we have students in our education system, the better they do. Go on to the next slide. The Lexile score has also demonstrated a 3rd grade decrease, and we do think that that has to do with the change in assessment in 2015, because it has not slowed the rate of improvement over the course of K through 12. And you'll also see when I go over the milestone scores that we have improved those as well. Go on to the next slide. Now recall that I mentioned that Lexiles are a measure of readability. So when you have a piece of text, you have a range that students can score in with that particular text. The upper and lower lines here represent the upper and lower text demand limits. Something worth noting here is that as students matriculate through the grade levels, they approach the upper demand limit. And you can see this as the dots approach the upper black line across the grade levels. On to the next slide. The graduation rate is another piece of evidence that we use. This is the graduation rate between 2018 and 19, and we just received our graduation rates for 2020, and we continue to show accelerated growth in these areas. This is what it looks like when you disaggregate by race and ethnicity. Graduation rates across all student groups continue to rise. The largest boost came in 2015 with the change in policy regarding the high school graduation test. Note that students' academic learning has not decreased even as the graduation rate has increased. Their academic learning is also showing improvements and increases. More students now have access to a high school degree due to this change in high-stakes testing policy and expectations. When we disaggregate by race and ethnicity, we can see that all groups are improving. The gaps have decreased, but the differences continue to persist. On to the next slide. Graduation rates have also improved for all other subgroups, including economically disadvantaged, students with disability, and students who are English learners. The rates for students with disabilities has showed the most significant improvement over time, and the rate of improvement for English learners seems to be leveling off, something that we'll be looking at the department. Now I'm going to go into the milestones outcomes, starting with English language arts. On to the next slide. Okay, there you go. So what you see here are, in contrast to the Lexile scores, we look at the English language arts milestones to gauge literacy success. Note that the ELA milestones measures language, reading, and writing, whereas Lexiles are simply a score of reading text difficulty and the student's performance on the difficulty of that text. So when we look at the English language arts milestone scores, we're looking at a more comprehensive measure of literacy. ELA scores have been improving each year in every grade level, but especially in grade 3, as noted by the light blue dot on the y-axis. And this is a notable piece of evidence in contrast to the lowering Lexile scores, and we think this has to do with a positive focus on language at the early grades, and the overall ELA achievement has gone up across the grades. So we think that that early focus on language is really important for all of literacy learning across all of the grade levels. Note that 8th grade continues to improve higher than previous year, and we are curious about that 7th grade dip. It looks like it's evening out as the cohorts that have been exposed to the Georgia Standards of Excellence matriculate through the grades.
You've been muted. To unmute yourself, press *6.
Ms. Dooley, we've received notification that you were muted. I don't know if you did that yourself.
The next slide is pretty static.
You are no longer muted.
Sorry, I can't hear if you're talking about this.
You were muted for a moment. You're all good right now.
Okay. So the mathematics results also show a similar trend as English language arts. We see improvement across all of the years, across all cohorts, especially in grade 3, as noted by the light blue dot on the y-axis. We think this has to do with a positive focus of mathematics in the early grades as well. We have been, as a strategy for the Department of Education in our strategic plan, we have been focusing on those foundational years. Note that 8th grade does show a dip in the end of grade assessment for mathematics. We think this may be an artifact in the change of the population, as high achieving students often take the end of course assessment for 9th grade algebra instead of the end of grade assessment. Math does not show the same 7th grade dip as English language arts, but it does show a dip in 5th and 6th grade, which we think has to do with the change in the content focus. So we're looking at the new standards for mathematics in conjunction with this as we ensure that all students have the necessary skills for success. Next slide. The next 2 slides will show the breakdown of the performance gap for students with disabilities and students who are English learners. Do you have the table slide next? Okay, it's not showing up in my YouTube feed. There we go. Okay, so for English language arts, when we disaggregate our scores according to these different subgroups, note that where it says all students and it says 3.3, 2.44 for each of the different grade levels, that is the rate of change in the percentage of students who are scoring at or above the proficiency level. So that's the rate of change. Each of those percentage points represents thousands of students. So we're very excited about this positive rate of change. We really want to see, however, is a closing of the gap. So we're trying to ensure that all students have equitable opportunities to learn. We're looking to see, are we getting better faster with these student groups? We can see some gaps in the rate of improvement when we compare groups of students to the general population in Georgia. When we disaggregate for students with disabilities, English learners, and students experiencing economic disadvantage, we can see that Georgia is closing the gap for economically disadvantaged students. And this is really exciting because this is very hard to do. But as you can see here, we still have much work to do. You can go on to the next slide for mathematics. The same is true for mathematics, as can be said for English language arts. We are seeing the gap close and improving faster for students who are experiencing economic hardship. More can be done, however. We must seek to get better faster with students with disabilities, especially with English learners. But again, note that this is the rate of improvement. So we are getting better. Forgive that. Okay.
That's not my dog.
The English and mathematics slide here shows the percentage of students performing at or above the proficient level in the Georgia milestones for mathematics and English. Again, you can see the best line of fit is the dotted line. All lines are sloping up over the course of the years. That's exciting. But the ones that are have less of a slope are in our mathematics area, and that's why we were excited to look at our standards for mathematics to continue those rates of improvement and improve those. English language arts also shows improvement over time in our end of course assessments. And then the next slide is science and social studies. You can see here that since we revamped and revised the science and social studies tests and the standards, we also see students who are improving over time.
So are those?
Slide 14 is the National Assessment of Education Progress versus the national averages versus the state averages. Are we on that slide now?
Yes. Yeah, we're on the state versus the nation and NAEP.
Okay. So just for a little background, the National Assessment of Education Progress, or NAEP, as you'll hear it called, is a national snapshot taken every other year. A sample of students in each state gets a sample of test items. No single student takes the entire assessment. This helps us see in general how we as a nation are doing in comparison to other nations, as the NAEP is compared to the PISA test, which is conducted by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD. Because this is such an obtuse measure, it's helpful to look at NAEP over a long span of time. So you can see here how we looked from 2013 to 19. The NAEP was conducted last in Georgia in 2019, and Georgia's outcomes have mimicked the national outcomes since around 2013, around the same time that all states moved toward common standards. Therefore, it's not that surprising that we have stayed even with the nation until now. You can go on to the next slide. What's exciting with the NAEP scores, however, is when you start to look at our disaggregated scores for different grade levels across different subgroups, and you start to see how the change in the performance gap has been improving over time. And this demonstrates the change over time in terms of the movement toward that national average. We have been approaching it in every grade level for the last few years. And what's also exciting is when you look, sorry, go on to the next slide. When you look at our students disaggregated by subgroups in terms of race and ethnicity, you can also see improvements over time for the percentage of students performing at or above the basic level. This tells me that we are ready to move beyond the basic level and really improve the areas of proficiency into that highly proficient level. On to slide 17. So a final measurement that we were looking at in terms of identifying our rate of success was the external rankings of our state education system. The U.S. News and World Report reports state comparisons every year, as does Education Week. Those are two external ranking systems of note. We look at these as multiple indicators to evaluate each state's education system, and each of these includes things such as academic outcomes, school finance, wraparound and early learning supports, often called the chance of success. Note that Georgia has improved across all ranking systems. However, the best improvement has come by the academic outcomes. The other indicators, such as school finance and chance of success, have pulled Georgia's rank lower than the academic outcomes have. So if you look at the school years and how we've ranked, the gray dotted line is our academic outcome improvement over the years, and the other lines are the overall rankings. So if you wanted to pull those apart and look at the individual rank metrics, you can look at U.S. News and World Report and Education Week as some of those metrics. I'm happy to take questions now.
And Caitlin, this is Helen. Richard, I want to thank y'all. I know there was some talk about this not being ready to present, but when Caitlin presented this to the Board of Directors of the Get Georgia Reading, I was so impressed, and I thought it was such good information that you have been pulling together that I wanted the board to see it. And Caitlin, I know this is your expertise, and I know that you had said that this is a work in progress, because I think one of the superintendents asked you about flexibility and beating the odds, and you said you were probably going to be working on something with that too. But can you go back to that one slide that's the ELA and math, the end of course, on that shows the performing at or above proficient levels in Georgia milestone testing? Can you go back to that one slide again? ELA and math, end of course, is where 9th grade lit, American lit, algebra and geometry. I don't remember what number it was. There.
I don't have.
Is it this one, Helen?
It's the line one, I think.
That one?
No, it's ELA and math. It was both of them.
This one?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So you made a statement that day and showing how everything is moving up and the trajectories are going up. What do we see? I don't know how to say that. What do we see for the next year in comparison with this? I know, are we still thinking that there's going to be a broad gap because of COVID in here?
We do a forecast, and we can also pick up future years in order to look backwards at the gap. What I would recommend to most educators, and many of them are currently doing that right now, is they use formative assessments throughout the semester in order to pick up gaps and remediate. By the time a student has finished a course, it would be unusual for them to go back. So if we were to go back and pick up any gaps, we would put it this way. The end of course assessment is an end of course. Most of these courses do not lean on each other in terms of a spiral curriculum. So we would rely on the teachers to do formative assessments in order to pick up gaps right now.
Except for the algebra and the geometry, kind of have some skill sets that are in both, right?
Well,
is that an analytical?
Yes, however, recognize that those two courses are either or courses. So you wouldn't take algebra and then coordinate algebra. You would take algebra and then algebra 2 or coordinate algebra. So they don't lean on each other, and the content of geometry and algebra is very different. So they don't feed each other.
Okay, I thought when we did that analytical geometry and coordinate algebra that some of those skills, it had different standards in them, but they were at different places within the course of the year. Is that not correct?
I don't understand.
And, you know, in just having Algebra 1 in geometry, which was a standard course that we had, we offered either that or analytical geometry and coordinate algebra because that blended over multiple standards that were, some of it had more standards of algebra in geometry and more standards of geometry in algebra. There was some difference. And Matt, you don't remember what that was. On the standards.
Yeah, yes. Those two courses do, but I think, as Caitlin mentioned, there's that Algebra 2 that's in between them, so they're not one after the other.
Oh, yeah, I know that. You're right.
And then most of our districts, given the choice, have gone more to the discrete math, so they're going towards those courses that are a little bit more standalone versus the integrated math.
The Algebra 1 and the...
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Dooley? Ms. Dooley, thank you very much for your feedback.
Okay, at this time, Ms. Tiffany Taylor will come up and make a presentation on the charter.
Okay, and I'll share slides with Debbie.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dooley. We'll get that and make sure that once it's shared with Debbie, it'll be passed along. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I'll share a general update about district flexibility here in Georgia, and then if you have any questions, we can discuss at that time. So the concept of district flexibility began in Georgia around 2006 and 2007, and at the time the general tenet was that if we as a state granted some flexibility to our districts and schools, in the course of waivers from state education laws and state policies, then that would be an incentive for districts and schools to help remove some of that red tape and to be able to improve student achievement. For context, it should also be noted that, really at the time that a lot of this flexibility or these flexibility initiatives were coming into place, that we were also on the cusp of sort of the national recession at the time, which was a time when districts were also battling or grappling with funding shortages as well, and a lot of the flexibility was helpful to them in terms of meeting the needs of their students while dealing with reduced funds. So there are two district flexibility models in Georgia. There you have charter systems, and I'll talk about the nuances and the differences of each. You have charter systems, which are generally granted broad flexibility. As then you have your strategic waiver systems, which for context today, I'll from time to time say SWISY when I'm referring to strategic waiver systems, which were formerly IE squared districts when they were initiated many years ago. They are systems that have flexibility that are outlined specifically in their contracts. And then there are, even though there are those two flexibility contracts, you have Title 20 no waiver systems. So we do have systems that have chosen not to select the flexibility model and remained under the purview of all of the state education laws and rules in Georgia. This timeline gives a general frame of the number of systems in the state that fall under each of those categories for the flexibility contracts. So in terms of the timeline, it talks about when the laws were passed for those. And in 2008 and 9, we really started with about 4 charter systems, added on a couple of IE squared systems in 2009-10, and the numbers stayed generally low, even though charter systems grew pretty well throughout the years. They stayed pretty low until the legislature around 2015, or the legislature determined in June 2015, or that by June 2015, that all systems had to select a model. So they either had to select charter system or strategic waiver systems, or to remain at the time what was called status quo, which is what we now call Title 20 no waiver systems. And as you can see from the chart, to date, even though we've had some fluctuations over the years, we're now at 130 strategic waiver systems and 48 charter systems and 2 Title 20 no waiver systems. This slide just generally shows the map and outline of kind of where those systems fall throughout the state. Obviously, with 130 strategic waiver systems, the white areas on the map are what represent your strategic waiver systems, the yellow to categorize your charter systems, and the pink, which is a little faint here, represent your Title 20 no waiver systems. And I'll send you a copy of this as well. I saw taking pictures, so I'll be sure to send this to you. So in terms of some of the program comparisons between each of the flexibility contract options. For your charter systems, they are on 5-year contracts. Those petitions by those systems that have chosen to be charter systems, they met with their communities, all of them, whether they are charter systems or strategic waivers, met with their communities, determined what was the best option and format for them and their communities, and then submitted those petitions to the state. The Department of Education and the Charter Advisory Committee reviewed those recommendations for charter systems and continue to review recommendations for charter systems for renewals and any new petition requests. And then for strategic waiver systems, they're on 6 to 7 year contract terms, and the Department of Education in collaboration with the Governor's Office of Student Achievement reviews those petitions and makes recommendations to the State Board. The State Board of Education makes the final approval on each of those contracts. In terms of the flexibility, as I mentioned earlier, charter systems have broad flexibility from state education laws and policies. They don't have to outline to us upfront, even though in their petition they give us a general sense of what they plan to use those flexibilities or waivers for. but they have sort of a wider latitude of the options available to them. Strategic waiver systems have access, they have access to the same amount of waivers, but they have to identify those waivers in their contract. So as you've seen over the last, a few months, and actually really over the last several years since strategic waivers or RA Square started, anytime that a strategic waiver system wants to access a new waiver that's not identified in their contract, then we'll bring forward to you an amendment request of their contract. Those contracts have to be amended to add those waivers that have to be specifically outlined. For strategic waivers, they are required in their contract that they at least include one of the following waivers, which we generally refer to as the Big Four, which are class size, expenditure control, certification, or salary schedule. And for both of the systems, or for any of the systems, none of them are allowed to waive what we consider are called, for shorthand, common sense laws, rules, and regulations. So you can't waive anything related to civil rights or the physical health and safety of students or unlawful conduct near a school. There was a conversation yesterday about some of the TEKS and leaks requirements, those that are kind of specifically outlined, we don't have the ability to waive. And so none of those can be waived for systems. Next, we'll go to just generally a governance model. So charter systems do require a governance model in place. They require for for their systems to push down local school level governance and autonomy, such that each of their schools have school governing bodies that have some decision-making authority in the school, that provide some decision-making input, decision-making authority as it relates to areas on school improvement and personnel, some of their HR decisions, school finance and budgeting. Those requirements are not in place for strategic waiver systems or your Title 20 no waiver systems, even though those systems still must have or need to have those school councils that provide input and advice, but these governing bodies for charter systems are required. They're more required in nature and not advisory, as a lot of your other school councils are. A part of being a charter system, also one benefit is that there is an additional per pupil allocation to charter systems. In law, it is at 3.785% of the base amount for FTE for per student. And as obviously you saw from the chart earlier, as charter systems get added and come on, then that number obviously goes up because it's a part of a calculation. So to date, it's approximately for fiscal year 21 for the charter systems that we have. The amount is about $31 million in additional funding to support those charter system initiatives and governing bodies and needs. So on the next few slides, and I'm not going through each of these waivers, but I did want to highlight the waivers that have been granted for strategic waiver systems. And I say here strategic waiver systems specifically because, as I mentioned earlier, charter systems have broad flexibility, so they don't necessarily outline all of the waivers that are granted to them, even though they give us a sense of the waivers that they utilize. So these are all the waivers that have been granted, and granted is the key word, to strategic waiver systems. And you can kind of see the number of systems that have been granted these waivers. What I can tell you is, like for majority of these waivers, and I'll keep going through. Oh, I think I pressed the wrong button. Let me see if I can get back. I apologize. As I go through some of the different as we go through the waivers or the slides, and you can see the number of systems that access these waivers, what we know is that there are, that does not mean that these systems are actually utilizing these waivers. For a number of, and many of these waivers that are being used, that systems have access to within their contracts, what we know is on average, somewhere between 4% are, on average, about 35% of systems are actually utilizing the waivers for which they have access to. So what you end up having, except for your big four that really kind of deal with your funding, those you get more into the 85, 95, close to 100% of utilization of those waivers. So oftentimes what you'll have is systems who especially have to outline their waivers in their contract. They'll make a request for the waiver knowing that they might have an idea about it, but they don't want to wait until they actually need the waiver to ask for it because of the process of having to bring it to board for the process for amending the waiver. So if I wait until that point in time, that could put me down the road a few months from when I actually need to utilize the waiver. I did want to also, before I go through the waiver, share some general ideas of some of the things that districts have done with their waivers. I know for those of you who have been here for a while, you've gotten a chance to hear some of them, but just in general, for instance, districts utilize waivers to implement foreign language programs and, K-8, they really wanted to hone in there. Flexible scheduling has been a big one for a number of districts as they think about, as we talked about yesterday with remediation. They've been using it a lot for remediation, for pull-out segments, for targeted instruction or acceleration for those students that are ready to move forward to credit recovery. There's been a number for certification in specific areas for hard-to-staff positions that, what we may normally think of hard to staff. I remember working with a number of superintendents on charter system initiatives, and in some of our corners of the state, they've had real struggles finding, for instance, art teachers that are certified in art, but they've had great artists in their communities that were willing to come in and work with the schools, and so they would waive certification requirements to be able to have those experts to come in to provide that art instruction for their students so that they were still able to get that instruction during the time. So moving forward, talk about accountability, comparisons, and I highlight here sort of in the first row your legal Title 20 requirements, where they're all legal, your Title 20 requirements that are outlined in code, and then the accountability requirements as they are outlined in district flexibility contracts. So for charter systems, the accountability required outlined in code is simply that they will be based on the contract between the State Board of Education and the local Board of Education. And the way the accountability is outlined in those contracts are that each school within the charter system shall beat the odds each year, or reduce the number of schools not beating the odds, so that all schools beat the odds by year 4 of their contract. That the system will close the gap between the system's CCRPI and the state. That the system provides a safe school environment. The system will be economically sustainable, and that the system fosters school-level governance. For your strategic waiver systems, is a little bit slightly different. So you have that they are required by Title 20 that they include, their contracts include at least one component of the following student achievement measures that you see up there. So they've at least got to have high school graduation rate, your SAT, ACT performance, or your state standardized test data, or APIB participation performance, or any of the accountability measures that are in Chapter 14 of Title 20, which really outlines your state accountability metrics. What's included in their contract, though, is that each school must annually increase their CCRPI score by 3% of the gap between the baseline year and 100. And then that each school performing in the top quartile of the state within each grade cluster must remain at that top quartile for each year of the contract, or that if the school then does not meet the CCRPI target score goals, that they are determined to beat the odds through the beating the odds analysis. And essentially the beating of the odds analysis, in as layman terms as I can put it, is kind of taking a school and comparing it to other schools across the state with similar makeups and demographics. And what we try to see is like schools, and seeing what their comparisons would be in terms of performance, or their expected performance should be. So in terms of the strategic waivers contract performance information, what you have here is each of your strategic waiver contracts, their performance accountability outlines are for 5 years. So they have either 6 or 7 year contracts, but laid out in their contracts are accountability measures for 2016-17 through 2020-21. And for those measures, as you can see, year 1 for 2016-17, when they had that data, you had 1,192 schools that met their targets. You had 408 schools that did not meet their targets. And then provide clarification around the number of districts that had all of their schools meet versus the number of districts that had none of their schools meet. Then in 2017-18, we ended up having what we call a CCRPI reset. We had to make some adjustments to CCRPI to meet our ESSA requirements. And as such, that made us have to then, or made the GOSA and DOE have to change the targets for each of the strategic waivers contracts because the data could no longer be compared to the targets that were currently in place. So that became a baseline reset year in 2017-18. And then in 2018-19, which was year 3, was then the first year of data then based on the reset targets. And you can see the data there that you had 1,140 schools that met their targets and 525 schools that did not. 28 districts that had all of their schools that met their year 3 targets, and then 3 districts where they had no schools that met their year 3 goals. And that brings us to, obviously, 2019-20, where we did not have any state assessments due to COVID. And then this year for 2020-2021, where obviously with things still in flux, we don't know what that performance will look like as a result of the continued effects of COVID. However, as Caitlin just highlighted, Dr. Dooley just highlighted, in her presentation, we also can look at the overall performance of the state to kind of see what we've gotten as a result of this, not as a result of this flexibility, but with this flexibility being a component of all of the things that we've done as a state. And I think she highlighted very well, I won't read it to you again, the growth that has been happening in Georgia academically even though our districts have had in a number of years some difficult times, but also the flexibility to really kind of remove the red tape and provide some supports and innovations and resources to their students. So that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
It's very, very, very concerning to me that we don't have our Charter and Flexibility Committee stand alone as it was this year, and that we need to, in my opinion, very, very, very strong opinion, that actually this is a hill I'm willing to die on, that we need to bring back and have our Charter and Flexibility Committee reestablished to help discuss this very thing and how our decisions we're going to be making today are going to affect them, and how are they going to operate, and how are they going to move. That we've got to do that. And to me, our Charter and Flexibility Committee was probably, no offense to any other chairs, I've chaired budget many times, probably one of the most, trying to use words carefully, functional and informational committees that we had. And the value of the information that was shared, and the ability for them and people all over the state to come together and share information and go over the contracts and go over the renewals, go over best practices, who's doing what, who's not doing what. And it really, right now too, I want to see, Mr. Chair, I'd really like to see some more in-depth discussion about this and presentation even at our December meeting. Because particularly where we're looking at even FTE right now, we know our traditional, the number I've heard, I mean, I can't quote me on, it's 30,000 that we've lost students in the FTE count around the state of Georgia. How are our charters doing? Are they increasing in I know some are. How is Georgia Cyber Academy doing? How are our cyber? How are they faring? How are they doing things? How are they doing it? In exchange of that information. And I just really believe that now is our role is not even just oversight, our role to help be a place and a conduit for best practices in the state of Georgia. That committee, in my opinion, needs to be reestablished to have those discussions now more than, I think it's way more important now than it was even last year. So, Mr. Chair, with that, I'd love to have some further, I was going to mention this actually in the comments section and talk about it a little bit, but now I think is entirely appropriate with this presentation, because I know there are a lot of unanswered questions on how because they are really tied to to accountability. So.
Yeah, no, I hear your concerns, and I think that both a couple of questions, the information I was given about the questions were led me to believe they were around district flexibility, but we're happy to share information with you about charter schools. That was not an intentional oversight, it was just the scope of the question. What I will say, though, is that the sort of onus and purpose really of charter schools is around flexibility, but also how do we learn from that flexibility that charter schools have. And the reason then for transitioning the charter committee into rules was to be able to provide, I think, more of that alignment around how can all of our schools learn from each other around the flexibility that they all have. So instead of having a separate flexibility committee, to have then those questions asked in rules when we bring those petition requests, when that information comes in rules about charter schools, for everybody to be able to hear it and make those comparisons about what's happening with charter schools and what's happening with our sort of traditional schools, as they're called, at the same time, so that it is a, I think, cohesive discussion. There's a lot of overlap that's happening with each of them, but there's also a lot that they can learn from each other, and that would be beneficial, I think, in a rules committee to then also impact how those rules are impacted.
I understand. I completely understand and don't believe it was anybody's intent completely that it was that the new committee structure this year was meant for efficiency and to do it. Totally understand that, and that was the intent. And had an incredible year, and I think more than ever right now has flexibility. If we go back the last 12 years, Caitlin just gave Caitlin, I trust her on data more than anybody in this building. And she is awesome at it, and she loves the data. Well, if you look at ACT, SAT, NAEP, our own data, Lexiles, we have been on the right trajectory for the last 10 to 12 years. And to me, if you ask me why, and I've been asked why, flexibility tied to accountability. That is what Georgia has done as good or better than any other state. And right now, I get that, but right now I just think it's so important. And with 178 traditional contracts and over 100 standalone contracts, some are local. I know 70-something% of them are local standalones and different. That if we need to shine a light on that and make it a focus of how we're doing it, and I think the structure that we had of the Charter and Flexibility Committee, the members, I mean, it's in statute how the members are selected, and just after being on this board for 10 years, 9 years, having that and watching that committee work and how it worked, it was one of the best committees from oversight, information sharing, collaboration, cooperation, all those words. Was that committee, and I know it was no one's intent to do that, and if we would have had a normal year, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion right now, but it's not. And I just think particularly going into 2021, that we need to focus on that, and it needs to be a focused special look at that.
Yeah, and I agree. And then I think to your point, I know that the Charter Advisory Committee, which I mentioned earlier, is outlined in statute. And a lot of the work that they do, we have been working on our team on how do we get them to be more involved in these questions that you have around charter schools, because they had not been as involved in the charter school work as they had been on the charter system work. So we are working very closely with them to get them, to have them be more involved in those decisions around charter schools. And then I think a great idea would be for them to share with you their input, like we do with charter systems. Here's what they provide. Here's what their recommendations are for those charter systems. They can do the same thing for those charter school petitions, which would be very beneficial.
And just for clarification for everybody, there's the Charter Advisory Committee is a separate committee from what would be considered a state board committee.
Yeah.
Just so there's two distinct bodies. That Charter Advisory Committee is comprised of different appointees from different agencies, including this body. So they're entirely different committees. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Royal. In your opinions, and you and I have spoken about this, are absolutely taken under advisement, and I've actually talked to him about having a much deeper focus on this topic matter going forward. And also, with Butch Mosley currently in charge of rules, I'll have some conversations with him regarding, how this is all going to play out. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I'd like to just make a comment, and Thank you, because this is the best and most information that this board's gotten on charters and flexibility in a long time, in a year, or at least 11 months. And I've spoken to the chairman briefly about this too, because and I understand, and it was worth an attempt that. Let's be more efficient, but let's have more eyes, and that's and I understand that. Let's have more eyes looking at items regarding charter, and it was folded into rules. We may have more eyes, but we have a lot less information than we've had in the past in this board. Having chaired that committee, having served on that committee for 7 years, from when my inception on the board until it ended. Until that board ended, and having served on that board, and as chairman of that board before I was chairman of the entire board, we got information that was valuable. That we got we got reports from districts and schools on how they were meeting their flexibility contracts, which was incredibly important, worthwhile, and you all, as you all know, this board has grants charters, so we need that information. And while it may have been a good attempt, and it's certainly no reflection on the rules chair, because he's doing a fine job, but it just, by adding it into all the other items that Rules Committee has to oversee, it has fallen in its our ability to get information and to evaluate these charter and flexibility contracts is much lessened. And I will echo my colleagues to the left here, Mr. Royal's idea that the committee needs to be reestablished, and it is important. It's a big responsibility of this board to be the board we are the final authority that grants charters, whether they be state charters or local. And the people of this state have spoken. They like charters. The citizens do. I mean, they spoke on a statewide constitutional amendment, and in general, they like it at the local level. And not everybody likes it, I'll grant you that. But the people of this state do. And that's who I'm here to represent. And so I just concur and say let's have that discussion very soon about whether, and it'd be up to this board controls its future, right, about whether that committee needs to be reestablished. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
And you do, I know, I agree. Obviously, I don't have a say in whether you choose committees or not. I think for context, we changed to this committee structure in January with the new chairs for the condensed structure of rules. So you had January and February, and then in March was when COVID hit, and we went to a different structure. I don't know that we've had enough of opportunity through the Rules Committee. I know we haven't had a lot of dialogue about charters for the items that had come forward, but I don't know if 2 months has been enough of a timeline and context to say whether or not I think that worked or not.
Yeah. But I want to restate. Thank you for this presentation.
Absolutely. Anytime.
It's like water to a thirsty soul when it comes to understanding and reestablishing my understanding of what's going on with charters.
Absolutely. We're happy to give presentations or answer requests that you have. That's never a problem.
And this has been surfacing for a while, and a couple of things too is that, and Mr. Royal and I have spoken to this, Mr. Johnson and I have spoken about this, is that there is a tremendous amount of accountability relative to the State Board of Education, specifically related to charter schools and accountability. And specifically, if you go through Georgia code, there is a lot of what I call shall language. And, the more you dive into that, you say, are we doing this? Are we doing this? Are we doing this? And my intention was to have a retreat in October and this was going to be one of the forefront items during that time. And for a host of different reasons, we had to reschedule November elections. Now we're going into the holidays. We will have a retreat in the first quarter or thereabouts for 2021. And during that retreat, there will be a distinct focus on charter schools for this. And so give everybody adequate time, adequate preparation, so that we can, look at some of these things. And not just the approval process, but where we are. And Mr. Royal, Mr. Johnson, I hear you. It's like you'd like to hear some information about where our charter schools are. And I don't know if that is, and we have a short window before our December meeting. Is that enough time for a presentation to be prepared and assembled to present that information in December?
Shouldn't be a problem.
No problem? Okay, so Ms. Caputo, if we can make sure that we have that as an agenda item for our December meeting. And then with regard to the committees, we'll take that under advisement, and I'll have further dialogue with the board.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, with all due respect, I don't think this can really wait till first quarter next semester conversation at a retreat with what we've got going. By that time, we'll be dealing with policy and rules that are done with the end of the school year. I think this say 178 of 180 are under contracts. About 5% of our students in the state are in standalone charters. I think this deserves and requires immediate looking at, not taking under advisement for a retreat TBD. And going, and I look forward to some more discussion about this in December, but I'm just trying to be as transparent as possible. I think we are making a huge mistake for our students, for our districts, and for our stakeholders and everybody if we do not make this a priority.
Understood. All right. Any other questions or comments?
I agree.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Taylor. Superintendent?
Chair, members of the State Board of Education. Just want to just very briefly talk about the document that's been recently presented to you, I think via email, having discussions with the governor's office. And that, is the roadmap to reimagining K-12 education. So, I don't really want to go over, point by point as we look at this, because it is, kind of a vision, of looking towards the future. I think it's important that even as we have seen all the gains, which we have had great gains over the years, Georgia, in many ways is leading the state, taking on an approach of the whole child, recognizing there's more to education, just ABCs and 1, 2, 3s for student success, and looking at what student success looks like. With the Reimagining, document, we want to make sure that we offer our students the best opportunities to succeed in life. I think that is what we are about, is providing them. We get a shot from pre-K through 12th grade, and once they graduate from us, then, that foundation is, whether it is strong or weak, is based on our ability to provide them everything that they need to do to succeed. As we look at, the future and seeing where do we need to go, and again, this will continue to be an ongoing conversation, but just some things we are trying to make sure is that our children do have a well-focused education. I think one of the things we cannot go back to and continue to promote is a one-size-fits-all. For myself growing up, and again, participating in an education system where I did have options, starting off, into a VOTEC school, and, looking at HVAC, and again, eventually, moving on to to having 2 degrees at a university within Georgia, thinking and contemplating probably a regret that I did not go into the military for a period of time. These are all viable options for us. What makes us a great state is the flexibility we have. From agriculture to the military to great universities that are recognized throughout the state. We have a lot of great opportunities for our children to be thinking about, we're the #1 state to do business. And I think that as we look at being the #1 state to do business, that means we do have a good education system. People do not come to a state nor do they start businesses, if there is a weak educational foundation. But we want to continue enhancing that. We want to continue to make sure that we continue to be the #1 state to do business. Giving our kids opportunities that they can expand. I mean, for an individual who grew up and was, within a rural district, for a person that knows what rural Georgia looks like, that one of the things we emphasize is that the opportunities for our children cannot be limited based on a regional demographic. Things that I have seen across the state, whether it's seeing our very youngest kids have access to foreign language. I mean, we have roughly, I think, about 700 Japanese American or Japanese companies within. I think strong. Korea is another great partner that we have. Germany and France. I mean, if you begin to look at this is an important aspect of education, and it is about providing our children opportunities. And I think that as we look at that, how do we continue to expand that? Thinking about what we talk about, of course, today we're talking about, student weights. And when we've had a good discussion on testing and what is the purpose to testing? What is the purpose of accountability? And I think that, one of the things we look at is maybe trying to reimagine, testing. Again, as I look back as an educator, I don't care whether you call it milestones, whether you call it CRCT, and going back, is basically the same model. And that is something, like I said, with the names changed, but I think trying to look at, what is the purpose of testing? And I would say, it is not teaching to the test, but we must, teach to learn. And, learning is what we have to focus on for our children. That it cannot be that I prepare for a test and then in many cases just let that material slide, but that information needs to continue on with us as we progress through. And I think we're looking at having some discussion on perhaps a student level rather than a grade level approach to teaching and learning, and that kind of helps out taking a child where they are at. To be honest, I think working especially as an administrator in elementary school, what I definitely and clearly found is that our kids are not at the same level. I wish they came in at the same level. And you find out that, they definitely don't. And I think that as we look at that approach, it is not necessarily trying to bring everybody to a mediocre middle, but it is trying to move our kids that need remediation to move them up to where they need to be, but for those that are at grade level to accelerate them. And so I think that, offers us a great opportunity if we are to continue to progress. We don't push everybody to just, like I said, the middle. But we need to make sure that success has an infinite ceiling for all our young people that gives them an option. And I think one of the ways we do that is to create multiple diploma options or graduation options. And again, however you wish to say that. I think that, we can have a diploma for the state of Georgia, but I think it's just like graduating from a university. You have different colleges within that. They receive the same diploma, but they have different colleges that lead them into a different, pathway. And it's supporting, what our young people desire to do for their future. To be honest, I think that one of the great things I'm seeing, and in fact, I was at a school the other day, and they mentioned that we had a special needs student who, graduated, and they graduated, with some industry credential certificates in welding. Well, that special needs child is now at Plant Vogel making a living. And I guarantee you, if you're working at Plant Vogel, you're making a very good living and probably a better living than a starting teacher, when you talk about pay. And so I think that as we begin to expand that, and one of the things and concepts and And I know we were talking with Senator Martin, about what that potential looks like. To recognize that, not saying that any education is less than, but all are equal to. Thinking that if I want to go into the military, that's a great pathway. My dad was U.S. Navy for 30 years. And I can tell you, he does not stop talking about anything but the United States Navy and what that, provided for him and for us. If you want to go to the university system, and again, that may look at different high levels, whether I want to go into engineering or want to go into education, that's something that we need to make sure that we're providing and supporting those kids so they can be very successful in that. If you want to go to our career, technology or career tech schools, as I've shared, welding is a great opportunity for anyone. Our medical field is a great opportunity, computer science and things of this nature. And of course, what we are finding out is that as we're having this discussion, we're talking with USG, we're talking with TSG, we're talking with the military to find out, what do you need? Again, like I said, they are receiving our students. And so I think it is important that we want to make sure that once they leave us, that they succeed. And I think that's one of the things we want to continue to look at. To give our kids that jump start on post-secondary education, post-secondary life. Again, if you want to go into straight into the workforce. Again, I know a young man that his mom and dad, or at least his family, have a septic tank business. Well, I can tell you, when you live out in rural Georgia, septic tank's pretty important. It's an important thing that you have. But what his plans were to basically, I'm going to take over the family business. That means once I get in there, you understand where we're at. But the point is that he didn't necessarily have plans to go on to a higher education in a sense, but he has a job ready for him. And with that business and with the family, that means that he told me, I'm going to be making $70,000 a year. And that's right off, and I'm not even the owner of the company yet. So those are things that we see, and it is providing a pathway for our young people and ensuring that they do have that jump start. I think dual enrollment has been one of the biggest game changers we have seen in the state of Georgia. We do it right. I think we've had to make some corrections with that, and I hope that as we look at that this year, we begin to continue to make sure we do not undercut that. I think that is one of the best programs that our state has done, giving our kids that many who have never thought about having college credit now have college credit. And I think that once we begin and we start to see that they receive that, they're more likely to take on that and finish that. To give them a taste of success in a safe setting as they go out and again once they leave us upon graduation. Looking at, we talked about reducing high-stakes testing while enhancing formative tools. I think one of the things we've looked at, we've had a great discussion. Again, everybody knows my heart with looking at testing. I think testing has to be done right, again, for the sake of learning. And I think with the formative approach, it does offer that. That's something we want to continue to look at. We're looking at perhaps our state testing, very similar to that. And I think that's very important that we continue to look at a model that continues to push the button. And I think that as you look at the vision, what we were talking about, and one of the things we look at is not standing still. You cannot live on the laurels. I think, there's a reason we don't make horseshoes anymore. And again, there's a reason why we progress and why our cars and things are much more efficient, while they are much more safe today. It's because we don't wait. I think for many of you who own a business, what happens if your business is stagnant and does not grow and it does not change. It will not be around. And I think that's one of the things we look at trying to make sure that we do that. Hopefully we can, again, have larger discussions with the General Assembly, the governor, lieutenant governor, and looking at expanding our K-12, or at least really approaching and revisiting our K-12 funding formula. At the end of the day, it is great that we have been able to fully fund, our QBE funding formula. But at the end of the day, it's still a 1985 funding formula. That's just the truth. That's something that I can tell you as a teacher who was in the 1980s, education looks completely different. That classroom is completely different. For me, when I was starting, technology basically was an overhead projector. It was a ditto master in which we had to type things out and crank our photos out by hand. That's the way that we lived. And, there was, like I said, the only thing smart inside the classroom was probably our teachers and our kids. That was it. We didn't have the technology. I mean, the things that we have today just did not exist. And we have to look at probably reprioritizing and making sure that we are very successful across the board. And we continue to look at that. Defining what a 21st century, classroom, looks like. But also giving flexibility. And again, we just talked about flexibility. Flexibility is something that, is needed. Whether I think you mentioned Superintendent Fort, in Tolliver County. Well, that's, to be honest, they were social distancing before social distancing was in fashion, okay? You have a school system that basically is almost around 100 kids. I've been there. You have, within grades, there's like 5 or 6 students per grade, or per classroom. And then you go up to somewhere like Gwinnett, Cherokee, our larger districts here, where you have over 100,000 students. So, life looks different, where you're at. And so I think that flexibility is important. It is important to set bars. It is important to set standards. Because at the end of the day, we have one shot with our kids. But we've got to make sure that we continue to push, that we continue to get better, that we continue to see a vision. Even though we are in the middle of a pandemic, one of the things I have heard consistently across the state is that we're seeing a lot of silver linings in what we're doing. Some of the things that our schools are doing, they don't plan to throw away. And so I think they've been able to take, even amongst all the darkness and the cloud of uncertainty in here, they've been able to see some things and move forward. And I think this is what this document, encapsulates. Coming in, 6 years ago, but again, going back even 10 years ago when I probably started this journey up here, and even as a classroom teacher, my job was to continuously get better. I think about what my classroom looked like, the first day in 1988 where I started, but how much it changed over the year, and it got a lot better. And again, it was always because I did not do the same things, but again, tried to continue to push and try to continue to move forward. We will continue to have dialogue with this. I know that, we talked with Chairman Sweeney, and I think sometimes perhaps next year, but this is going to involve a lot of people. It will involve you as the State Board of Education. It will involve the governor. It will involve, our General Assembly, our communities, business and industry, higher ed, and even up to the federal government. So this is just something I just want to kind of share with you very quickly. And, and what we're, about. We have shared it with you, but, it's kind of a little bit of a vision in progress. And I think you have to start with a vision to be able to move forward, take that information. And, but it has a lot of, I think, common sense that what we have been doing and working together and accomplishing, that how do we move that next layer? How do we continue to push and give our kids every opportunity to success? To be honest, Georgia looks a lot different than it did in 1988. I can guarantee you, I look outside the windows here, and Atlanta looks a lot different and will continue to look a lot different. Down in South Georgia, Savannah, I think one of the greatest economic engines that we have yet to actually see is the Port of Savannah. But I do know I'm seeing a lot of logistic buildings that are being built out, distribution centers that are all over the state. And that means that we in education have to look at and prioritize what are we going to focus on. We cannot go back and let our schools become grandpa's old shop class. It's great. I can say I can make a terrific candlestick, but, I'm afraid my mom and dad were the only ones that were impressed with that. So, it is thinking about what our kids' needs are and providing them, the needs for the future. And I think for many of you, again, as I said, in business, you're looking towards the future. And I think this is what this document, says. Any questions on this real quick?
Just real quick, I appreciate your comments today, and as I've said a couple times, I appreciate where your heart is on this, Superintendent Woods, and I know that we have to represent and do represent all of Georgia on this board, and I appreciate what you're saying too, and that we're going to work together on this. I haven't read over it all diligently, but some of your plan, and I think there's a lot of good things in there that we can work towards together. I only have one correction on anything you just said. they are still making horseshoes.
Yeah.
As the father of a daughter who rides horses competitively, I can assure you they're making them, and I can assure you they're expensive.
Yes.
So,
Well, probably because they're making them fewer, they are more
yes,
expensive,
supply
so it's supply and demand, yes.
horseshoes than my wife's shoes.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
only correct.
I cannot speak to the feminine need for school or for shoes in whatever form. I mean, it may be even horsepower, I guess, is something we look at.
As another fact check, I'll verify that septic tanks are very important.
Cousin Eddie says they are.
Yeah.
So,
And-
Ms. Cowart?
I just want to say thank you. I want to, Richard, for this presentation. We've seen it, it was sent to us, but there's nothing like face-to-face presentation because, as Mike said, that allows us to see your heart. And one of my biggest areas where my heart is are the children in rural Georgia, and so much of Georgia is rural, and for many of us, that's a large part of our districts. We want those children lifted out of poverty, and the only way that's going to happen is with opportunity and reimagining, like you said, education and getting so many people involved. We've seen that most especially in our CTAE, where you take the average person in a community and they come in and they spend time with our children. Wow, what a difference it makes in their life on a lot of levels, just from a personal mentor experience all the way to the professional aspects of what they do and opening their mind to things they've never even had the opportunity to think about. So I appreciate this. You know, my passion is for communication, and communication, you've heard me say a million times, is the key to success in every area of our lives, and I'm very appreciative for this today. And I always say, where there is no vision, our people will perish, and that is actually scripture. We've got to constantly move forward and constantly have a vision, and I thank you and all of those working on this vision, as it is imperative for our children and for the future of Georgia and for all of them, their success in whatever they choose to do in life. So thank you.
All right, are there any other questions or comments for Superintendent Woods?
And Mr. Chair, I just have one quick thing I think will lead until our next discussion. With that, I know we are looking at, talking or at least making a decision on the EOCs today, and again, the weights with that. And I would just like to read a brief statement. Again, it's more of a positional statement. I don't think it's any surprise, where I land on this. But I think, given the myriad of topics discussed yesterday, I want to be abundantly clear that really the only decision we are faced with as we look and move on with our vote today, and that's before you, is how much weight, a high-stakes EOC test is a part of the student's overall grade. That is really the only topic that we are looking at. It is for a one-year exemption. We are not looking at moving on. We have not asked for anything. Again, I am not an individual that is opposed to accountability. I'm not an individual that, does not dismiss, the value of tests. We can get into, why we give tests, and again, much more discussion on that. I think we have advanced in that. But we go back to the point, how much will you weigh the high-stakes EOC test part of a student's overall grade? I think the most important word within that question is the word student. That is what we're about. There's no qualms. I think that all of you know that what we're about is doing what's right and what's best for students to give them the opportunities to prepare them for life. Yesterday, again, I think we talked about different things, whether it was accountability, measuring a school, or teachers' work, credit recovery, all good things to talk about. But I think we have to make sure that we are focused on the task at hand. I mean, a lot of these are different, topics, and again, what we find out is they are just probably legs to a common stool. And so there are, as we look at things, there's just a multiple of things that we talk about. I think if you look at our strategic plan, we talk about the whole child. We talk about the proper role of many facets of education that will lead to a child's success. The fact is we are in a pandemic, and districts are struggling to provide regular instruction. That goes, and I think you heard today, across the board. And again, as I've gone out, I see it, and I'll see it this week. And again, my plans are to visit a multiple of schools and districts, Lord willing, and that nothing else happens, I'll be able to do that. But our test and accountability tools are designed to measure a traditional instructional environment. Needless to say, this is not traditional environment. There is nothing that we can look at with this. And I think this is, again, in my many years, almost 50 years of being involved in education, from being a student to now state school superintendent, we have never seen anything that has an impact or has had an impact on our public education as this pandemic. The percentage this board decides will not impact the school district rankings or school or district rankings. It will have a decision, it will have an impact on GPAs, class ranking, access to scholarships for students. It will force families who have chosen a virtual instructional option to either send their child to school or to take the academic consequences for not taking a test. For those who are medically fragile children, the decision could be more far-reaching. But again, I go at and I reiterate, the decision will only have an impact on students. It will not have an impact on our schools and our districts, but it will have an impact on the students. Start days have been all over the place. Instructional models have been over the place. We've had rolling quarantines. Again, as you heard this morning, in for 14 or out for 14 days, back and then out for another 14 days. The word equity, and again, one of the things that the federal government talks about, and again, this is a federal mandate that we are talking about. Equity is something that they could talk about constantly. And I can guarantee you that this year there is nothing equitable about education. Some of our neighbors in neighboring states have yet to be in school face-to-face. They have decided to go completely virtual. We have districts that have yet to go into face-to-face instruction within our state. And again, the word equity comes up, and we know that with that there is no equity at all involved in our education this year. Furthermore, I think we should not dismiss the opinions of 93,000 Georgians or their 600 public comments so easily. I think in representing the people, as was mentioned today, there was not a design to skew the survey that we had. It was, again, tried to make sure that we heard from the people of Georgia day in and day out in an honest way. It was no intent to come, have a predetermined outcome based on the survey that we would get the outcome that we want. As I've traveled throughout the state and met with superintendents, met with principals, and even today as I talk, I said, what I believe is based on my experience. It is based on conversations I had. And again, this is a recommendation that comes from me. And as I've shared with these people at local levels, I said, if you think that I am wrong, if you think that I have been mistaken in doing this, please let me know. Now, the people that I have talked to and visited, and I have visited many schools, no one has said, Superintendent, can you reconsider? They have been very supportive of the initiative that I have brought forward. So again, I just ask you to not dismiss what we have heard from the people of the state of Georgia. It does say something when our public comment, our surveys results in a separate survey done by an independent group conclude the same results in the message. This is what Georgians truly feel. Teachers know the context of connectivity issues, which many face throughout the state, quarantine realities, family issues, and can grade and assign tasks accordingly. An EOC does not have compassion or does not recognize that context. As I shared yesterday, the EOCs, or we talk about milestones in general, it is COVID neutral. It does not recognize anything except we will have to have something taken, a test given on a day. It does not worry about whether a kid has been in school or not been in school. Have they covered the content during the course of the year or have they not? It is just simply a neutral, impartial, uncompassionate register that we have to do, and what good will the information potentially receive? Again, it is not equitable. Today we look at that with a traditional year, our weights are 20%. But that means we actually trust our teachers with 80% of the teacher's grade. If we move and adopt 10%, that means that we will say that we trust our teachers with 90% of the teacher's grade. As I've shared, I think, time and time again, my question would be, why can't we trust our teachers with 100% of the grade this year? I firmly believe that if we can not focus on the test, but give our students and give our teachers 100% to work on content, we will move our kids further than necessarily looking and focusing on a test. 0.01, 10%, 20%, perhaps other percentages have and will be thrown around today. Could be conflicting decisions, but again, I remind you that you are setting the floor. This is just the floor. Any district can make those changes to what they feel is best for their students, to push them, as they feel needed. Again, what you found out today is that, many of the schools and the schools I've visited, it has not been the academics that have come first this year. It has been safety of our kids, safety of our teachers. That has come first. I cannot tell you the amount of anxiety that I knew that we faced before even going into school. Even as we looked this year, that as teachers were looking to come back in pre-planning, there was a huge amount of anxiety about stepping into the school. My email box, which is sure that your email box has saw the same, with concerns that we had. And so I think that as we look at that, we are, again, going back, we're just setting a floor. In contrast with the overwhelming survey and public comments and a few anecdotal stories of people who want something higher than 0.01, can be set with the board adopting 0.01%. They can go to 10, 20, 50% locally. There's nothing wrong with that. I assure you that as I've been around, we are testing kids. We're working to try to find out where they are. Whether it's some, independent program, the Beacon, or other things that are out there, we are doing our very best to make sure, but it is very challenging. As I've shared yesterday and have talked with people, the virtual impact of education is unknown at this time. You have kids that perhaps are not, being exposed to the amount of content. You have, families that are having to perhaps share devices. Some connectivity is very, intermittent at best. As we look at this as well, it is a challenge. It is a challenge that we have not seen. But again, as I conclude, I strongly recommend that the board reconsider the 0.01%, to consider the realities of COVID-19, to keep in mind that as the body moves on to pressing other decisions, which we will continue, it is our teachers and our students that will have to live with the decision today. That will not change. But again, I thank you for your time. I thank you for listening to me with that. It is the heart of myself as a teacher, as an educator, as state school superintendent, that I bring this forward today with the recommendation. And as we move forward, we'll move forward together. But what we do know is that COVID-19 and the extent that it has an impact on our children will not stop with this vote. We have to look forward to the days ahead. We have to look forward to what remediation and supports look like. Again, education, we talk about this reimagining document, but we're having to reimagine education even as we speak. And that's what our educators are doing. But I do think that this vote and with this would allow us more flexibility and the ability to fully address learning concerns as we move forward. So, Mr. Chair, I yield the field or leave the podium to you, sir.
All right. Thank you very much, Superintendent Woods. I appreciate your comments. All right. We're going to move on with our agenda. And at this point in time, we have to approve the agenda. So on the consent agenda, and I believe each one of you have this, and Debbie's is posted. Correct. All right. So everybody.
Chair, just a question procedure. When are we going to get a comfort break before we go into moving?
A comfort break? We can take that immediately if you would like. All right.
Superintendent's comments about septic tanks.
Okay. Is 10 minutes enough?
That would be fantastic.
All right. Let's. I'll tell you what. It's 11:22. Let's get back here at 11:35. 11:35. We'll recess until 11:35.
Thank you.
And Kenneth, are you still with us? And Butch, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I hear Kenneth. Butch, are you still with us? Debbie, can you see about reaching out to Butch? Okay, first item is our agenda approval, and in front of you, each of you should have this sheet Debbie provided, and noting the consent agenda items. And is there anything that we need to pull from consent? Hearing none, that's great. From policy and rules, we have the state board rule adoption, the Georgia Board of Education Rule 160-4-2.13, the statewide passing score adoption, and that is pulled for a separate vote. Then we have executive session actions, and that is it. There is no other changes to the agenda that I am aware of. Is that correct? All right. Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. I have a first from Ms. Kenmore.
Second.
I have a second from Ms. Zoller. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Butch and Kenneth, can you let us know how you vote?
Aye.
Butch is not on the line yet. Okay, so it is unanimous, and we have a 13-0 vote on that. So the agenda is approved. This brings up the next item for a vote. And again, this is the adoption of TL State Board Rule, Georgia Board of Education Rule 160-4-2.13, the statewide passing score adoption. And before you, you have the actual copy of the rule that I had distributed by Debbie earlier. This is it. The modification to the rule is highlighted in red, and it is posted publicly. And so the adoption recommendation is for the 2020-2021 school year only. The numeric score on the Georgia Milestones EOC shall count for 10% of the student's final numeric grade in the course assessed by the Georgia Milestones EOC. All right. So there's any question about the item before us? Okay. So at this point in time, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the state board adoption, state board rule adoption as noted.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
All right. I have a first from Mr. Royal. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, I have a second from Mr. Allen. Now we are open for discussion. So are there any comments or questions?
Chairman Sweeney, and I'd like to use Mr. Royal's words here from earlier, flexibility tied to accountability. I would like to submit that we amend the motion to the superintendent's original proposal of 0.01%, because that would give ultimate flexibility and the ability for the school systems, as we trust them, to give accountability. And I believe that in that case, it is the best way to go for this pandemic year that we are in, so that we put the students first. So I would like to move that we make a motion to vote on amending the motion to 0.01%.
Okay, and just so I'm clear, and I'm just going to try to help with the language here.
Yes.
So what your language is essentially, it's for the 2020-2021 school year only. The numeric score on the Georgia Milestones EOC shall count for 0.01% of the student's final numeric grade in the course assessed by the Georgia Milestones EOC.
Yes.
So this is, so you're making that motion,
Yes.
all right? So I've stated the motion. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Second from Mr. Benton. Okay, is there further yes, Mr.
Sweetie, just point of order, I just want to be clear, because my experience is different. Wouldn't we have, for an amended motion, wouldn't we have to agree to that
David
amendment?
Mosley.
Is now exiting.
Substitute motion, but for an amended motion, wouldn't we, as the original motion, makers of the motion, have to agree to have our motion amended?
No, I'm not sure.
No. No, it doesn't work that way.
Okay, all right. I mean, I understand where we're going here. I'm just saying, I want to be clear, because I thought that, my understanding, that would be more a substitute motion as opposed to an amendment of an existing motion that we had made.
You can.
I understood it as an, pertaining to the rules, I understood it as an amendment during the period of discussion, if that's how I understood it.
So there is a proper motion with a substitute motion. That substitute motion could be entirely different from what you have here.
But this is not this is an amendment to our proper motion.
This is an amendment, so you can also make amendments by replacement. So it's changing the number, for example. And so that is a proper motion.
And again, I understand. I'm not trying to argue that, I mean, we'll get to this one way or another.
Right.
I just want to make sure we are doing. In my experience, whenever an amended motion is made, you always have to ask the original motion.
Yeah. Well, I see where you're going. I think I can clarify this from a point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, that's all. I want to be sure we are very much in order here.
Exactly. Because we're dealing with a rule change, and so the motion, we can't make a motion. I would think a motion to amend this would be out of order, but here's why. Not that we can't get there. Because this is what's been posted. I would think, I mean, I understand, just follow me for one quick second. Because we need to get to a resolution. I'm not trying to pull any parliamentary procedure on anything. This is what was posted. And state rule says that if we amend what was posted, we have to repost for 30 days. I would just maintain that the proper or easiest, best, clearest way to maybe do this, if this board gets to .01 at the end of this discussion, we have to, by rule, repost it. So it might be best to have discussion, and if that's the will of this board, to, on this rule that's been posted, vote this down and then make a motion to post the new rule as .01 for the 30 days that we have to vote on.
Well, I defer to the chair and the co-chair on the rules on that. They're disagreeing, so.
Because this isn't a typical motion. This isn't a motion for us to adjourn at 2 o'clock and substitute motions.
I just want to make sure we are very much.
We're dealing with state law and rules, so this is what was posted for 30 days. So if we change this, we have to repost. So amending a motion to approve this, I would think would be out of order because we can't, because it hadn't been posted for 30 days.
And I appreciate that, but the chair and the co-chair are disagreeing with
Can
your
we
assessment.
go to rules? Can we ask Paul?
Yeah, the item has been posted for 30 days. And it is, so you can do an amendment of the current motion, but you have to be clear in your amendment if you're choosing to change it, that an amendment will have to go back for another initiation. So you'll be amending to initiate for another 30 days for that number.
Okay.
Okay. So, Ms. Zoller, do you want to restate your and I have the language here. Do you want me to read this?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the amendment then would be for the 2021 school year only, the numeric score on the Georgia Milestones EOC shall count for 10% of the student's final numeric grade in the course assessed by the Georgia Milestones EOC. And if the board moves in this direction, it would require another 30-day posting.
I would like to go forward only because what we heard here today from the people that came, as well as what we heard, whether overwhelmingly online, what we heard is what the people want and what the school systems want is 0.01%. So I think that deserves a vote for that because of that overwhelming evidence in favor of that. Plus the fact that the clarification of the fact that they could count at 10 or 20, which I don't think was as clearly stated last time as it was this time. So really what we're saying is, that we are giving the ultimate flexibility tied to accountability to the school systems if we adopt this.
Right.
And I think that was a true statement in the fact that it was not clearly stated that way.
Thank you. I try to do that.
That we have a floor, and from that point, It can move up. I didn't get that feeling the last time, and I think that this is important that we get this right. And it's not, to me, we've heard from a lot of people, and I know that accountability has to be here. So if we move back to the .01, we're entrusting our systems to put that accountability. Here's what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
If we give it at a .01, that does not mean, don't worry about it. That means this is a starting place, and you can do whatever you want to do on that scoring. Is that correct,
For this
Richard?
period of time.
Let me step in for just a second, because procedurally, I restated your motion
Yes.
with the posting, but I did not get a second. So is there a second for the restated motion?
Second.
All right, I have a second from Mr. Benton. Thank you. Now we can continue. When we restated the motion, I didn't get a second.
I was just going for clarity. So this is what we're saying now. If we go back with the 0.1, that this is only a floor, and the schools are going to have the testing with accountability there, so they have the authority to raise that to whatever level, and we're counting on, like you said, Richard, we're counting on people to take this seriously, which I think they will, and we're counting on our students to, we're not trying to ding anyone for anything, but we're asking that we get the best that we can from this testing year with what we have, so that we'll understand what content needs to be, what we need to fill in.
The key phrase is meeting the students where they are, because in every school system you have, maybe they started late, maybe they've been out 4 weeks, maybe they've started early, maybe they're going back to in-person online. I was very compelled by the argument made by the students that they might have medical issues at home, so they can't come in for the test because that would compromise. And then if they have the option to do the 0.01%, then it doesn't hurt them if it's done everything else. That was very compelling to me.
Well, I'm compelled to know that the content, what we learned from this,
Yes, of
this
course.
test is going to fill in the gaps for our students. It's going to help
Absolutely.
us see what is better. So I just wanted to have a clear understanding
Yes.
of where we were going with this. Thank you.
And my apologies, Mr. Chair, I actually had researched, I'm just aware that in my experience, they always ask the originator of the first motion for their acceptance. Apparently, my understanding is that that is to avoid a separate vote. It does happen, but that is just to avoid a separate vote. Without it, the amended motion is voted upon as a separate vote and then the original motion. So my apologies, I was just trying to be I want to make sure we were very clear
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, there's no worries. And actually, and just talking with Ms. Taylor here, and just for clarity's sake, is that the rule adoption, we might even insert the word a minimum of 0.01%. So it gives that
Okay.
gives that flexibility
Yep.
to a district,
I'm fine with that.
understanding with total clarity that this is a floor. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so, can we restate your motion again?
Yes, okay, so for the 2021 school year only, the numeric score of the Georgia Milestones EOC should count for a minimum of 0.01% of the student's final numeric grade in the course assessed by the Georgia Milestones EOC.
And shall be posted for 30 days.
And it shall be posted for 30 days.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Dr. Mosley, thank you. Mr. Benton beat you to the punch. So we have a first, and a second. Is there further dialogue or questions or comments before we take our votes?
May I ask you a question?
Ms. Kennemore.
Just for clarity, if this is amended and placed on 30 days to be used publicly for input, what about, is there going to be the tests, the EOCs given in between the time that from today until we vote on this, and will they be impacted by the 20%?
Superintendent Woods?
Yeah, again, with the test, I think the calculation, is Dr. Timberlake with us today?
Ms. Kennemore, districts need to know on the back end at the end of the semester how much the test is going to weigh, so that we know students are still going to have to take the assessment. So we give them flexibility with their administration. You might have some districts wait to prolong assessing students until this is formally adopted. But districts can wait to the end of the semester and even a little bit after to calculate that student's final average, since y'all are deciding how much the test will be part of the final average.
Okay.
So we've talked to many districts, and this shouldn't impact the logistics on their front.
Can they wait till they've covered the content?
They could
Is that
do
what you're
They
saying?
can do that as well.
Okay, that started later.
That's correct.
All right.
Well, I think we had the one school in January, so
That's
there were
correct.
several weeks out.
Yeah, but some were supposed to be doing it in December, so,
But I was
yeah.
just thinking, if it was later, the one school started later in their administration.
Ms. Kennemore, I asked that question of a district a district person who deals with that this morning, because that came up yesterday, how that would logistically work, because right now it's 20. And if we were to go to 10, because some have already started taking them. I mean, everybody's at all different places.
Yep.
It's not quite that simple. I mean, they can go in and adjust the weight. Some of them, superintendents would have the authority to make that decision themselves. Some of them would want board approval to do that and change that. And he said, it's obviously not a clean way to do it. The best way would be to have an answer going into the test, because you have students, some good students are already calculating what they need to make on the score to get the score they want in the class, weighted at 10%, 0%, or 20%. But they have the ability, because the Georgia Student Finance doesn't calculate until the end of this school year.
Right.
So whatever the district does in between now and then, they can do and they can change, and they have the right and ability to do that. It's not that clean. It's not as easy as it sounds, because you are going back and recalculating students' grades. You're recalculating the weight. So if you got it at 20%, and the way he's explained it to me is, okay, you've got your summative assessments at 50, this homework at 30, and EOCT at 20. Now, and you go to 0, now they're not on 100. Which are they going to weight? These 70 and these 30, these 60, these 20? When you do that, they've got to recalculate everything. So now, are you telling a kid a test they took back in September that they didn't study as hard as now we're 70% of their grade versus 40% of the grade? The gist of it is there is no good answer. And if we take it as a simple fix to go back and retroactively do it, we're making a mistake. Can it be done? Correct. Is it the right thing
But
to do?
nothing's been simple in this year. Nothing's been simple in this year.
So it's
Are there any further questions or comments?
Yeah, so there is a way to possibly address this. If we're concerned about students at 20%, we could pass 10% today. And then there could be a further motion, then there could be an additional motion to lower the threshold to 0.01. If you're concerned about the 20%, if that's your real concern here, then we could pass this. There can be a subsequent motion to be posted for it to minimum to be 0.01 and be posted and address it. If that's, if you're worried about 10 students being
Being at 20.
So replace
deemed at
one.
20%,
Yeah.
we
Possibly
can
replace
half
that
that,
one.
we can half your concern. If that's, I'm just saying that's an option. Anyone disagree?
To a point of order to that, what you're saying is theoretically, we could vote 10% today, and there's nothing to stop us immediately after that, posting a potential rule change for 30 days from now,
But it's
0.01.
convoluted.
That is what I'm saying, and I believe that's correct, and it's also, it would just require another motion. Just require.
Well, whatever we
the board-
do, if we don't do .10, it's going to require a motion and a vote in 30 days.
Well, let me start by saying this, is that with the motion that's before us, if we adopt this, if it fails, we revert to the existing motion, which is the 10%. So if this motion fails, we'll have that opportunity to approve it at 10%.
Okay.
And at that point, if that were to be the case, then if we wanted to introduce a separate idea for an agenda item, okay, to adopt something, another board rule, for example. The challenge is that part's not on the agenda. Okay, and that's the challenge. Okay, so we're dealing with the agenda item that's before us. So procedurally, going through the primary motion, the amended motion, backing off of that amended motion, if it fails, then you still have that 10% option.
And I would just add that in the meantime,
That's
if
correct.
if we adopt
They
this,
can go back
if we
and
adopt
change
this motion today and go to a subsequent motion, then no student is held to more than 10%. That's
Right,
just my point.
and then, and just to make it perfectly clear, a tie, we are a 14-member board, a tie is a failed motion. Okay, so, bear that in mind, and if we are at a tie and before I finalize a vote, I can offer reconsideration. Okay, if anybody wishes to reconsider their vote in the event of a tie. And if there is no objection from the assembly with regard to somebody potentially changing their position in case of a tie, then another vote can proceed before the vote is finalized. Any questions?
I mean, I feel like we're back in a awkward situation because there's this big concern about if we have to post for 30 days, that these kids that are taking their end of course test now are going to be bound to 20%.
No, that's not the case.
Well, they don't.
Well, as of this second, but.
Well, they won't know for 30 days.
Right.
Because they got 30 days in limbo.
So the potential for anybody still being at 20% is significant. Okay, this body can't decide on either 0.01 or 10% or some other number, whatever that may be. I mean, the existing rule remains in effect. So anybody and everybody should have the current mentality, because there is no rule change, that we're at 20% unless instructed otherwise. And 20% is the floor. Right now, as we sit here, 20% is the floor. Okay, so we have, a motion on the table with regard to 0.01, and then we entertain that and figure out where we're going to go from there. Dr. Mosley and Kenneth, I know you're online hearing some of this, but if you have any comments and you'd like to weigh in, now would be the time to do so on the motion on the floor.
I don't have any comments, sir, other than the fact that I think you know what I support.
Thank you, Dr. Mosley. Kenneth, do you have any comments you'd like to share?
Yeah, will you restate the motion that's on the floor?
Yes, I will. Okay, so for the 2020-2021 school year only, the numeric score on the Georgia Milestones EOC shall count for a minimum of 0.01% of the student's final numeric grade in the course assessed by the Georgia Milestones EOC. And this rule will be posted for 30 days for comment and review. And we have a first from Ms. Zoller and a second from Mr. Benton.
Okay, thank you.
All right, do you have any other questions or comments?
No, I am ready to vote.
All right.
My only point is just a very slight variation. If in 1 month 0.01 fails, we don't go back to 10, we go back to 20. Just so you all understand.
Well, we could take up the 10%
No.
motion again.
Yeah, right now, we are in a motion within a motion. That was what I was trying to
But I'm
clarify.
saying-
So
but-
if the
so this
0.01
motion
fails,
passes.
we fall back to the 0.10.
Just restate. So this motion passes, and we go to restate. In 30 days, after the comment, next board meeting, called or regular, and we don't, then that motion passes. We don't go back, oh, we're back at 10. No, we're back at 20. That's,
Fine.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and
I just want everybody to understand the ramifications of not voting on 10 and then another motion to go to 0.01 is to remain at 20 if it doesn't pass.
in theory, the board could still adopt a different number and post for another 30 days. And,
We can
you know,
continue
we
to kick.
continue to, you know, kick the can down the road. So, you know, Mr. Long.
Mr. Chairman, just for, make sure I understand protocol and procedure, after this is posted, either way, what decision is made today, will it go for public comment again? And will that be open for record for, not necessarily a survey, but it will be out for public comment again? And make sure I understand that this is no different than any other rule, and it will be out there to see what the public says about this.
Precisely.
Okay.
If the substitute or amendment is what passes.
Understand.
Yeah.
That's what I was referring to, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm saying that's the original motion, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Unless you pass at 10%, and then we put 0.01 for next and let the 10% be maximum.
And that was Scott's point.
I'm sorry, Lisa, can you, yeah.
I was just reiterating what Mr. Johnson had said. If we approve the 10% being the maximum, and, I'm sorry, the minimum, being the minimum, and then we take up the amended portion that Ms. Zoller said for 0.01 to be on, for public comment for 30 days. And that way, we won't, there won't be any issue of it continuing to be 20%. We will go from 10%, and then next month, we will have on the agenda, recommendation on the agenda for 0.01. Is that correct?
Is your question if we vote for
And
10?
then that would post for 30 days.
If we vote for
Yes.
10 today, that
Yes.
takes 20 off the board.
Takes
20's
20
gone.
off. 20's
So
gone.
we know that everybody's at least comfort level is it's been cut in half.
Right, 10 is off.
10,
20
10, 20's off the board. So they know for certain, and we've already set the rule, it's the maximum, our minimum is 10. And then and then within post for 30 days, the rule change, and then it could go to 0 effectively.
So with those that were under the 10, would they go back and recalculate to
Yep.
the, okay,
They would have to.
okay.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, one last thing. Y'all remember my speech yesterday was about time, and I think we got to be very cognizant of time and the timelines. And I know we've got colleagues that are feeling differently about this subject matter, but I think moving forward, we're going to have to come to a vote that says we're going to move forward, and they kind of know where they're at, whether it posts for 30 days and something else comes up. But it's just I think we've got to be very cognizant of time for those students that are finishing up course into this year. So, and give them some sense of continuity in their mind that they know what they're looking forward to. And I still say that we'll, put the accountability back on them. So, just a point.
And I don't disagree with your point, and timing is important. But I would say this, there's no difference in timing in a reposted original motion or a posting of a new motion, except for if you're really on kids' side, do you want to go to 10 and then decide for another, or what do you want? Do you just want? So I'm having a hard time wondering who really is on kids' side.
Well, I think that what we've heard from the staff is that even if we come back to this in 30 days, after it's posted and vote on it, that they will have the flexibility to deal with the first semester things. I mean, I think that's a false choice to say if you go one way, you're not on the kids' side, and go another way, you are on the kids' side. I think we're all on the kids' side.
And okay, I understand what you're saying. So the false choice, but I'm saying, do you want to take half of it half the concern off the table by lowering the threshold to at least half, or do you want to take the chance? I don't know how.
I think we take the vote on the motion that's on the table, and then we'll see what our options are after that. That's what I think is the prudent thing to do.
And all I'm saying is that if you vote on the original motion and have a substitute motion, no child will have a 20%. Well, we'll have the possibility. That motion might fail in a month from now. I don't know. It might pass unanimously, or it might fail. But what we do know is that some kids, maybe forever, but maybe all if it fails, but certainly not, or some in the meantime are going to be at 20%. I'm finished.
Could you add to this amendment to be retroactive?
No.
No?
May I try to elaborate? So to what Scott and Ms. Kennemore's point, I understand exactly. So as it stands, it's 20. Theoretically, hypothetically, if this .01 passes, your substitute motion does pass, that becomes it. The 10 goes away. We have to wait until our next meeting. Well, what happens if there's a change of heart or something? And then at that point, the .01 fails in the actual vote, which is what we have today for the .10. There is no safety. If that fails, it would fall to 20. I believe that's your point. Okay, I just wanted to clarify for everyone. Ellen, do you understand? You understand exactly what we're saying?
I understand what you just said, yeah.
Okay,
But,
so.
I mean, we've been adding.
So you're saying if we were to vote for the 10, it'd be kind of like a safety block for the, right. But without that, hypothetically, even if we approve the .01 now, we'd have to approve it again, and if it fails, then there is no safety, it goes back to 20, and we don't have enough time to make another adjustment. That's what
Again,
you're saying.
Theoretically, that is true, but what we have heard from staff is that depending on the timing, regardless of whether it's 10, 01, whatever it
Right.
is, that they have the flexibility for it not to impact these students for the first semester.
For 30 days, but if we have to keep doing this with
Yeah,
another
but
30-day
I
vote,
mean,
is his
if the
point.
sky falls tomorrow, you
No,
know, it's
I'm not making the argument. I just want to make sure everyone is clear that is what you're saying, and that is your concern.
What we also heard from staff while we're still in discussion very clearly yesterday, and I even asked it twice, is if we're at 10 and there are students that need to retake it because of situations, they can. There's flexibility. They can get incompletes and redo it, and there's other bites at the apple for students that are in that marginal window of needing hope or wanting to get to Princeton instead of North Georgia or whatever,
well, the same is true for
too.
20.
Now,
Isn't the same
No.
true for any number?
Now, let
Yeah.
if I might give opinion on that now. I agree with what we are currently doing. I agree with Ms. Zoller's substitute motion. I think that's, and let's just be honest, I am for 10%, and I'm going to support that, and I would like to speak to it probably during this motion, because if this motion passes, then I don't have an opportunity to speak to it. But that being said, if we do vote for the .01, the concern that in 30 days it may not be voted upon, let's be realistic. If we are all, this body, faced with a choice of accepting the .01 or going back to 20, I cannot imagine that there is a consensus here that would not accept the lower tally. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't believe, from what I know of everyone here. So to your point, if it is.
I'll echo that, Trey. This needs to end today. We need to send a signal, a message, and a vote to our teachers, students, administrators what this board is going to do. Whether it's today we vote for 10, or we vote to, the will of this board is to repost and do .01. If 10 falls today, gave it my best, I made my fight, I made my points, it didn't work, it's .01, and I will be, if .01 wins today, I can tell you in 30 days, unless some miraculous miracle or something, there's a burning bush that tells me not to vote for it, I'm going to be voting for .01.
Right.
Because we need
That
that.
was my point.
We need that for our districts. We need it for our kids. They need to know today what they're going to be expected to do in the next month academically.
That is my point as well. I understand the concern and the fear. I don't, and it is a hypothetical possibility, but I don't see that as a realistic possibility, because I don't believe anybody here would allow it to fall back.
And I'll make the point I'd like to go. I love the idea of the concept of everything is not either or, it can be both and. You ever heard that? Y'all ever heard that? Everything's not either or, it can be both and. And I think that my proposal kind of speaks to that, but let me just say, I believe we're procedurally correct here. If this amendment fails, and it's a proper amendment. I mean, it can be done. It's a little odd in that the reposting kind of makes it odd because, but neither here nor there. If the amendment fails, we can still vote on 10%. And take a motion to vote on 01. Okay, so that, again, back to where.
You can't have two bites of that.
We can, if the amendment fails, we can still go to Plan B. That's the both and part. And say, hey, you know what? Let's put it out there for .01.
Are there any other questions or comments on the motion on the floor?
I think those were questions, just for point of order, question and comments really on procedure and where we are and where we got. Now, we've got the motion on the floor. I think everybody's clear and we've done that. Are we in discussion now on the motion?
Yes. Yes. Is there any questions or comments regarding the motion on the floor?
Which is the amendment.
It's the amended.
.01.
It's the amended motion, and so
Discussion on the amended motion.
that's where we've been.
We've been all over.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, this is a weighty matter, no pun intended. So I think it's one of the most important decisions facing the Board of Education this calendar year, this school year. And, I'm just trying to make sure that we have a very open discussion and that everybody has their chance to make their feelings known. Yesterday, we had a, deep discussion. We covered the ESSA matters, the 95% requirement. We covered TEKS. We covered CCRPI growth, baseline matters. We covered scholarship matters. We covered the floor. We covered delay start dates. We covered models. We covered quarantines. We covered schools still not in face-to-face education. We talked about the test administration challenges. We talked about the survey results. With 93,000 respondents, 80,334 or 86.31% favoring .01, 10,569 or 11.35% favoring 10%, and 2176 or 2.34% favoring 20%. We've heard from Gail, we've heard from Paige, we've heard from our RISAs, we've heard from a variety of people, and the emails that were received yesterday from Ms. Taylor. One of them stood out and said, our students' futures are riding on these test scores. It could be the difference between a scholarship for college and not going to college at all. It also made me remind that a lot of times we think of seniors in the high school level in this regard, and it's not just the seniors that are impacted. When somebody falters a little bit in their freshman year, it has a long-standing impact. It takes them a little while to catch up. So this is not just affecting seniors with regard to scholarship opportunities. It's affecting freshmen, sophomore, eighth graders even, as well as freshmen, sophomore, and juniors. And it's my feeling we should not penalize students for matters over which they have no control. The pandemic, the waiver denial by Secretary DeVos, remote learning, late school start dates, internet, let alone broadband access, device access, big data service providers and their failures, distance learning challenges, a variety of education models, which are virtual, hybrid, and face-to-face, content delivery within compressed timelines due to late starts, not the least of which is the administration of tests, health concerns, and then I also understand that with the results here is that we heard from Dr. Timberlake yesterday that, the options for students that are unable to take these tests, either of their own volition because of health concerns, because the families won't send them in, or lack of face-to-face administration, that they only have an incomplete option or a 0, which would impact transcripts, graduation, et cetera. So anyway, that is it. And so is there any further questions or comments? All right, hearing none, I'm going to
I wanted to make, I won't be anything new, but there was something said today that jumped out at me, and I do want to not go without it unnoticed, because there was something said, and I'm trying to respectfully disagree or bring it up in the most respectful way. In your asking us, Superintendent Woods, you said something, and I wrote it down. With it 20%, we trust teachers 80%, and with it 10%, we trust teachers 90%. I don't look at it that way at all. You got to trust teachers 100%, but as Ronald Reagan said, you got to trust but verify. It is a percentage of this EOC. This EOC is one test that a large segment, but way less than half. I don't know the numbers right off the top of our head how many students take. But I know you don't. I know. Well, I know. I pretty much know your heart, and I know you trust teachers 100%. But the statement that if it's 20%, we only trust 80%. I don't feel that way. When we're doing the EOCTs and we're doing accountability, it's to verify, and what gets measured gets done. You know, all those things we talked about yesterday. But that jumped out at me today. And some of the things that Mr. Floresta said, I admire Cobb County, I admire Chris, great relationship with them. And I asked him at the break, I said, how many, because to put it in context, I'm just trying to remember, put everything in context, is I asked him how many seniors, it's all, but how many high school students are going to be taking EOCTs, should be taking EOCTs. I wrote it down. You said about 6,200 in all of Cobb County. Because we're talking about one test, I'm not downplaying it because it is important, one test in over hundreds of tests the students will be taking. To say this one test is going to decide whether that student makes it or breaks it. And for those that are on the bubble of that point, it can. Let's say it can. 6,200 of those students that are in that have either A's or B's in the classes right now is right at 3,000. That's a lot of kids and a lot of faces that we can't see, not downplaying at all. And I asked a logistics question. I said, can you get those 3,000? I didn't phrase it this way. I don't want to put words in his mouth because words matter, and I'm trying. The way I intended the question, can you get those 3,000 to be safely administered the test? Yeah, and I talked to another large district. The problem's not getting them in to be safe and we can socially distance and different things. The flip side is how many won't go and take it, and what's our participation rates, and what does that mean for the ones that don't go, that opt out or don't go, and I don't have an answer for that. But I'm just trying to put what I've learned new today or different context in today into this vote and do it. And the only thing I know we don't need to look at, you know, what it was 93,000 responses. We don't know how many double voted. It doesn't matter. It's a bunch. Or triple voted or what. There's a lot of people have weighed in on this. But for me too, I've got to decide what's right and wrong for me. Y'all have to decide what's right and wrong for you. And we need to, as a board, vote today, I think, and we've already got that. But right at 2.4 million people in the state of Georgia voted for Biden that thinks he's the best for president. I disagree with those 2.4 million, and some of them are my friends, and we're still going to break bread together and go. But I appreciate everybody's concern and thought for this, and that's I'm just trying to right now and say this is important. We're going to disagree. About half of us are going to vote one way, about half are going to another, and plus one or two. But at the end of the day, I appreciate everybody's concern, but let's let this end today and be done and move on so that we can get on to what's best for the kids. That's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Royal. Okay, since we have board members on line, what I'm going to do is...
Chairman, I think we had another comment. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I did want to make my comments again, because if this passes, then my 10% is, forgone. So I plan to make comments on that motion, but if you'll allow me, and I apologize. I know I was very verbose yesterday, and if you'll indulge me one more time. As a quick remark, we're now, it's been discussed a lot the last 2 days that we're setting a floor. a floor near zero, admittedly, but a floor. My concern with that argument is that those that we need insight and data from the most, those are, let's be honest, there is disparity in our state. There are many that are far more impacted by this than others. Those are the ones we need to know about. Those are the ones we need the insight from. Those are the ones that we need the data from. And my fear is that they are also the most likely to choose to have little or no weight, and therefore, in my mind, little validity to their results. You know, and I, if you don't mind me just reading my thoughts here, our governor, he has definitely guided Georgia through this pandemic with a policy of both safety and determination. I think that's a fair summary of the strategy and the philosophy that we as a state have taken.
Lives and livelihoods.
And I believe that has been a great success in the face of adversity, in the face of criticism from all corners. I am very proud of how we've handled it as a state. I think that it is now our job to find that same balance of safety and determination for our children. That's why I believe cutting the weight in half accomplishes this. We're taking into account the unimaginable challenges of our times, but we're also telling our kids there are challenges that they will have to face. As their elders, our charge is not only to prepare them for life with their academic knowledge, but also with the tools and values that will enable them to deal with life's challenges as well. And the past is prologue. You know, I mean, the Trump administration's education secretary has said, we're going to have to administer the test. We've already voted to spend $17 million to deliver the test. The argument over whether we need to have them or we will have them at this point is not up for debate. Therefore, we can't make this a meaningless exercise in my mind. I really do believe our kids deserve better. The message we send today, and I had this discussion with several heads of several of the alphabet organizations that I spoke to, the message we send is more important than just the weight value of the test, in my mind. And now I guess I'm just getting a little philosophical, but it means something to me, and I truly believe this. It is telling our children that we understand their challenges, we love them, we care for them, and we want them to be smart and safe, but we also want them to persevere and attempt to excel in spite of all adversity. One of my favorite phrases is smooth seas never made skilled sailors. You know, and I know that may sound trite, but it is accurate. The value of these tests cannot be denied. There is value here. Even those that spoke in opposition to a 10% rate agree that there is value. They'll allow us to see how each district is affected in responding to the pandemic. Mr. Woods, just a second ago in your own comments, you said the virtual impact on education is unknown at this point. We've got to find out what that impact is. What are the best practices can be shared, and where would our resources be better utilized, how we can be better prepared if, heaven forbid, we should ever again be in a similar situation, because I fear that we will. And I believe that for all of that data to have any validity, there must be some weight given to its importance in the eyes of those taking the test. I sincerely believe that. And so with all of those aspects weighed and considered, I strongly feel that the recommended 10% compromise, and it is a compromise, we're already taking into account the allowance of the effect that school systems are facing, that children are facing, in the weight of the Georgia Milestones EOC test is truly in the best interest of Georgia and her children now and in the future. That is my belief.
I would just like to say one more thing. I think the message we are sending, in all due respect, if we take this up and we vote it and we post it for 30 days, is that we believe in local control, and we believe that the school systems and the communities know best on how to handle it, and the teachers and the students should be left to their own devices in this year, above all years, to be able to know what's best for the students they're teaching and not have a top-down kind of thing. I acknowledge it's a compromise, the 20 to 10, but I disagree with you that the message we're sending is it isn't worth anything. I think the message we're sending, if we vote yes, is that we trust you, superintendents and teachers and students, to do what is best for teachers and students and superintendents. That's the message that I believe it sends. But I respect everything that you've said, and I hear you. I hear you.
And I respect you. I will say, I did have a superintendent tell me that one of her high school principals literally said, "We just won't take the test," which I was disgusted by, but she said, "No, you have to take the test." He's like, "Well,
Yeah.
that is a true statement given."
I haven't heard anything like that, but that's,
A high school principal, not just a teacher, not just
Yeah.
a principal, actually said, "Well, then we just won't take the test." And that came from a superintendent. And I will say one other thing. I believe that the spark of optimism that a truly great teacher, that makes a truly great teacher, is also something that is the same spark that makes them believe that all educators are as dedicated, as loving, as hardworking as they are. So you will rarely find a teacher that would ever speak ill of any other teachers. We all know not every teacher out there is perfect. We have great teachers, but not all of them. Not all the systems are. That is, again, why we exist as a board. We've had to, I've sat here, I know not this year, but I've in my term, we've had to review and qualify entire local boards on whether they were suited or fit to even govern themselves. And without exception, to my knowledge, everyone brought before us were not. It does happen. And I am just afraid that in this case, there needs to be some level of oversight by us as a state body. But again, much like you said, I truly respect your point of view as well. So, and I think that is hopefully the beauty of this process.
I like to say I'm all about accountability. In fact, I think I'm Mr. Accountability. But I'm also conservative, and I feel like less government is more. None of us have been through a pandemic. This is new territory for us all. And you have families. Well, let me just say for myself, I grew up in an economically challenged environment. And I know that you have a large portion of Georgia citizens that don't have the resources to even think about virtual learning and all of the other things that are on the table. And I just ask that we be sensitive to that, and that we, again, entrust the local systems to do their job.
Thank you very much.
Scott,
Ms. Rice.
one of the things that keeps coming back, and you're so right on so many things that you just said too, is the fact that we do want to do what's best for our kids, and we do want our schools to be accountable also. And so the number that we're coming up with, if we say 0.01, it has to be in the message, as Leanne says all the time, communicate. How are you communicating this? If you're leaving it up to the districts, what are we saying to the districts? If this number goes through, are we just saying, oh, okay, here it is, here's your floor? I think there has to be a big message sent that with this comes, like Trey is saying, some point of accountability. With this comes some concern for our families and our teachers and our students. With this comes a desire to do your best with what you have and move that number and point to a top. Set a goal. Just don't be complacent with just the floor. Set a goal to make sure you can make sure that these kids get what they need. I think that's the thing we're all saying. We put 10% there because just what Trey said, we want to make sure. But is that the right number? Is 5% the right number? I was all over the board with what I got from my 17 superintendents. Yeah, some were happy with 10, some wanted 5, some wanted 0.01. I don't know what the number is, but I know the message is there. And whatever we do with this, it has to be messaged, Richard, with you out in the schools, with DOE also saying, this is what we have, but these are the things that we need to do to really make sure that we get the best from such an odd situation this year.
Mr. Johnson. All right.
No, you go ahead.
Leanne, I'm sorry I didn't see you.
What Mr. Allen said made me want to express one thing that I don't think I've expressed thus far, is that the information that comes from this testing, we need that information.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell you, parents need that information. And this department that comprises about, several floors of this building and some of the other educational departments that are in this building, they need that information. Now, the data from testing is crucially important in any year, but it is like on exponentially important information this year, I think. And I don't know how we achieve with some confidence to have, not to get this information without having some gravity placed on it. I don't know if 10% is perfect. I'm convinced that 0.01 is not, but I'm not saying that 10 is, or is it some other number? I don't know. And I really, when you all talk about minimums, I love our superintendents around the state and our boards. How many of you really think they're going to say, we're going to raise that bar? We're going to penalize ourselves. But I'll tell you what we can't have is when the aggregate numbers come back from this test, you can't say, well, you're telling me that they're going to take it real seriously if there's no gravity to this, right? That's what apparently many people believe. But not our students. They'll take it seriously, and our staff. When the aggregate numbers come back and they're terrible, are you just going to say, well, you really couldn't expect them to take it seriously? Can you live with that? Because that's where you're headed. So there are going to be some scores. It's just
a minute, Mr. Mosley.
How comfortable do you feel with those?
All right. Dr. Mosley, I've got comments from Ms. Cowart first, and then we'll turn to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Butch. I just wanted to say basically what you said. Show me the incentive, and I'll show you the outcome. And I think that was the whole purpose in US Ed, saying we've got to test. We gave you a waiver the first time. We got to know where our children are post-pandemic, so we'll have a plan in place or can get a plan in place to know how to assess their needs and where all the weak spots are, because they're going to be all over the board. And to echo Trey's point, we have seen a lot of dysfunctional boards come in here that we had to rule over to say, y'all need help and we need to help you. So there are going to be systems that will just negate the whole thing entirely just because that might be the collective attitude of those people. We are torn. And I want the public to know that we have not entered into these discussions lightly. Last month when we talked about it, it was the first time we talked about it, and we all had a knee-jerk reaction to say, well, whoa, let's just compromise. And we immediately went, boom, straight to the middle. And that's how we all just thought, well, let's just wrap our head around it, and 10% sounds good. And we've all weighed all that. We've talked to teachers, we've talked to parents, and business people. The businessman says, we're going to spend $17 million and not have anything to show for it. Somebody better show me something. That's what some business people are saying. So we've got conversations all over the board. We don't want anybody to be harmed. We don't want anything punitive. We want to deal with the realities of the situations we have. And dear Lord, we hope we're never in this position again to have to talk about it. But some are going to win and some are going to lose, and that's just how it's going to be at the end of the day. But there were reasons for everybody's comments, and they're all valid.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cowart. Dr. Mosley.
I I've listened patiently to all the comments, and I respect what's been said, but I think that, and I don't think what I'm going to say is going to change any minds, but I do want to say that when we analyze, first of all, the results of this testing this year are going to be skewed anyway because of the fact so many won't be able to take it, so many virtual learners don't have the opportunity, so many poor students are left totally out in the dark with still no internet access in my area of the state. And we have many, many students that are not in school on a daily basis. The results will not be anything that we can hang our teeth in. But what really, really eats at me, being a former educator, of course, I live and die with the educators, and yet try to listen to reason from business people. I'm also a businessman, I might add, and have been a very successful one. But what really bothers me is that we 14 people, we sit here in Atlanta or at home in our comfortable chairs, and we're thinking for people that are out there in the field that are grinding it out every day, that know what's best for their individual systems. And here we are telling them what we think they ought to do when they have overwhelmingly told us what they think they should be allowed to do this year. And so I just encourage you to weigh this out. I was thinking, I came from a county back in the 30s and 40s that there were very little rules and very little laws that were enforceable. And what I'm saying, if you stole a hog down here, you go to the electric chair. If you killed somebody, you had a pretty good chance of getting off if you had money and got a good attorney. And I don't want us to go back to not listening to the evidence of the people that we entrust to run our schools. And that's, in my opinion, what we're not doing. We're not listening to those that we entrust to do the job for us. That's what that's all I got to say, and I just hope you'll weigh heavily what we're about to do, and then vote your conscience, and we'll live and die with a vote.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Mosley. Are there any further questions or comments? All right. So the motion before this body, and I'm going to restate the motion, and this is state board rule, and this is in reference to the statewide passing score. This is, the rule number is 160-4-2-.13, section 2F, and then the number 1. And so the number 1 is being proposed as, for the 2020-2021 school year only, the numeric score on the Georgia Milestones EOC shall count for a minimum of 0.01% of the student's final numeric grade in the course assessed by the Georgia Milestones EOC, and this will be posted for 30 days for public review and comment. All right? So that is the matter before us. We have 2 members that are online that will be casting votes, and I'm just going to do this by roll, and then what I will do is I will call each board member's name, and a yay vote or a yes vote is in support of this amendment. Are there any questions? All right. Dr. Mosley.
Yes.
Mr. Downey.
Yes.
Miss Rice.
Yes.
Miss Petty.
Yes.
Miss Cowart.
Yes.
Mr. Allen.
No.
Miss Kennemore.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
No.
Mr. Royal.
No.
Mr. Long.
Yes.
Miss Zoller.
Yes.
Mr. Mason. Kenneth, Mr. Mason? we'll come back to him. Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mr. Mason, Kenneth? Did we lose you? May have lose you. The chair votes in the affirmative, and the ayes have it. The vote count is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in favor, and 3 opposed. And Mr. Mason is absent for the vote. The motion carries. So the posting, again, the motion carries. It's that for the 2020-2021 school year, only the numeric score on the Georgia Milestones EOC shall count for a minimum of 0.01% of the student's final numeric grade in the course assessed by the Georgia Milestones EOC. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's assistance. I appreciate the candid and frank discussion. All right, and so the department will take care of that posting, and then this will be up for 30-day review and comment. And that also means that in December, we will have a special called meeting for the purpose of ratifying this or for further discussion, comment, and review. Any questions?
Yeah.
It's not 30 days from
We
now.
confirm
Yeah.
9 and 10?
Sorry.
December 9 and 10, but
That's our
this will
regular
have to be
meeting.
a called meeting after that.
So our regularly scheduled board meeting will precede that 30-day window. So we will have to have a special called meeting for this purpose. Okay? All right. With that, that concludes the agenda.
Legal.
I'm sorry. We do have executive session items. Turn that to Ms. Kinnemore.
Have a recommendation. It is recommended that the State Board of Education deny the appellee motion for reconsideration in case number 2020-33.
All right, we have a first and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. We'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, and just for a vote count, is Kenneth on the line? Hearing none, so that vote is unanimous, 13-0. Ms. Kinnemore?
It is recommended that the State Board of Education affirm the decision of the local board in case number 2021-01.
We have a first from Ms. Kinnemore. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second from Ms. Rice. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion? Hearing none, the chair will call for a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. And again, Kenneth, if you're on the line, please make yourself known. He is not, so the vote is unanimous at 13-0. That concludes our action items for the day. I want to personally thank everybody very much for the very frank, candid, open discussion. We wanted to make sure that all voices were heard, and I really, really appreciate everybody's input and feedback today. And again, this is really the most weighty decision. I look forward to further review and comments that we'll hear from the Georgia Department of Education on this matter. Is there anything else before the board before we adjourn?
Scott, I just got a question.
Yeah.
Can we get an update on health standards possibly and this on standards, what is going on with our standards that we were on hold for? Where are we seeing that move though?
We can give you a little bit of update. We did receive public comment. There were concerns in areas that we felt we needed to go back and address. They did consider, or they surrounded, I think, the area of abstinence.
Same thing we'd looked at before.
Pornography was one that really had not been addressed in the standards. And I think some, a couple other areas with there, but there was enough public comment that we felt we really needed to go back and pull the group in to address. And so we're in the process of trying to get that group together and look at things that the public felt needed to be looked at.
Well, we'll be glad to help you.
We'll send the information out as far as what that looks like, and again, why we felt we needed to do that. I mean, again, it was significant enough feedback that we felt that we needed to address it.
And also on our standards that we put on hold, that we were looking at quote-unquote Common Core, what's happened with that?
Again,
We're
just
gonna get back
looking
into
at
that.
I think probably at the first of the year, we'll be able to look back and get back cranked up with that.
So
Right
we
now,
haven't done anything.
well, I mean, we've had the teacher review, we've got, standards looked at. Our next step will be probably two areas. It will be looking at the academic review. They have to look at the standards themselves, and the governor's citizens review, so.
So when the academic review looks, can we be notified about that? Okay.
Yeah, there's no date set, but I think probably we're looking sometime in January, I think.
Okay, so, all right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
our general counsel has suggested that we go ahead and set a date for our called board meeting on this issue. So that would be, the 19th of December would be 30 days. So could we set it for the 21st?
Does anybody have a challenge with the 21st as a date?
It's better than any other day after that.
Dr. Mosley, I don't know if you heard that, but we're looking at scheduling for a called meeting, and the 21st is being offered as a date, the 21st of December.
But we have
Okay.
when do we have our regular board meeting then? 9th and 10th? All right.
All right, there's no objection. The 21st should work. All right.
Are we setting a time as well?
We can.
So we can go ahead and put on calendar?
Probably a good idea.
That's the first day of winter.
Well, in that case.
I mean. Oh, that's right. Oh.
We need to have a meeting that day. We can
Don't say that about my birthday, I just say.
Hey, we called and sang to you.
It's an afternoon at 2 o'clock work? 2 o'clock, 2 p.m. Debbie, will you send out the invitation for that?
I will do that, yes.
Okay.
Very good, love it.
And also a reminder about Winter Gale is the 24th, January the 24th through the 26th, and it's in Athens at the Classic Center. So everybody probably needs, if you go and start looking at that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Before we adjourn, I want to wish everybody a very, very happy and safe holiday Thanksgiving celebration. It's a national holiday. I know that this particular year is near and dear to everyone's heart, and we do have so much to be thankful for. I'm thankful for each and every one of you, thankful for my friends, thankful for my family. Thankful for all the educators in the state of Georgia and all everyone does to help our students across the state. So with that, the chair will entertain Mr. Johnson.
One comment. Challenging meeting. Well done, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And with that, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Long. We have a second from Ms. Petty. All those in favor? Aye. Happy Thanksgiving. We're adjourned.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thanksgiving, Bud.